Konoha 9 years after the Kyuubi attack. A party was taking place in the backyard of the Namikaze Manor, a birthday celebration by the looks of the balloons, presents piled in a corner and kids playing around. For today was October 10th, the day that the children of the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, were born. Mito Uzumaki Namikaze and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze were their names. Despite it being the same day that the Kyuubi had attacked the village 9 years ago, the spirits of the partygoers, along with the rest of the villagers, were positive, as it was also the day that their 4th Hokage, along with many other brave shinobi, fought and defeated the Kyuubi, saving Konoha. However, it was said that today was Mito and Naruto's birthday, but really the only one being the center of attention was Mito, while Naruto was sitting on a tree branch that overlooked the backyard. The boy was nearly an exact copy of his father, with Minato's blonde hair and tan skin, but he had his mother's purple eyes along with whisker marks on his cheek. Naruto just sat on the branch as he looked down from his spot sadly, as everyone else was having the time of their lives, with Mito getting dozens of gifts. It all started 9 years ago, on this exact same day. The Kyuubi had been extracted from its host at the time, which was none other than Kushina Uzumaki, after she had just given birth to the twins. The culprit was a masked man, who claimed to be Madara Uchiha, and had succeeded in killing the Umbu guards and Kushina's midwives before separating Minato from Kushina after using Naruto as a hostage, and thus managed to take Kushina to an unknown location and release the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi, under the masked man's control, began attacking Konoha, causing massive casualties to both shinobi and civilians. While the fox was being held off by the shinobi, led by the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and his 2 students Tsunade and Jiraiya, Minato was battling the masked man before successfully injuring him and cutting off his control of the Kyuubi. Once the masked man retreated, Minato headed back to aid the others and was preparing to make the hardest choice in his life, sealing the fox into one of his newborn children. It was a very difficult decision, and the current situation did not help make it easier for the father. But after hard thought combined with the pressure and fate of the village, Minato chose to seal the Kyuubi into Naruto. Once he decided, Minato took the Kyuubi to a location far away from Konoha in order to perform the sealing process. What transpired then is unknown, as Minato did not share what happened, but the sealing was a success and Minato, Kushina, and their children survived the whole ordeal. Afterwards would be the turning point of their lives. While Kushina and her children were sleeping at the hospital, recovering from the whole ordeal, Minato was meeting with the council, shinobi clan heads, civilians and elders alike. After explaining the mastermind behind the whole thing, and that the Uchiha clan had no part in it, Minato was soon asked by the Warhawk Danzo a question he dreaded: what became of the Kyuubi? Minato told them honestly that the fox was now sealed within Naruto, though soon after he regretted doing so. While the shinobi side was merely checking that the seal was flawless, the civilian side was screaming things such as to have the boy killed or locked away, while the elders minus Hiruzen demanded that the boy be handed over to Danzo to be turned into a weapon. Of course both were shot down, following 1 or 2 civilian council members being arrested and the loss of their seats. Minato made a law that no one of the younger generation was to know of Naruto's status, as punishable by death. Despite this, the civilians had spread word to the older generations of the new Jinchuriki. After so much loss and pain, the rest of the village began to hold resentment towards the newborn Jinchuriki, which continued up to this day. Despite the glares, insults and the rare assassination attempts, the Namikaze family continued living a good life, until the twins turned 5 did the adults discover something. Apparently Naruto did not possess the unique chakra that Kushina had, which allowed the older Uzumaki woman to suppress the Kyuubi. In fact, their daughter Mito possessed the special chakra, perhaps even at a level greater than their mother. They soon began to fear that because Naruto did not have the ability to suppress the Kyuubi, that he might one day lose control of his emotions, freeing the Kyuubi. At the time only the parents, Jiraiya, Tsunade and Hiruzen knew of this piece of information. Naturally they kept this a secret from the rest of the village. But somehow about a month later, though there were some guesses of how it happened, word of Naruto's inability of suppressing the Kyuubi spread throughout Konoha like wildfire. This made the village population scared that the Kyuubi could attack them again, while at the same time angrier at the boy and more desperate in their attempts to harm the child. Things only got worse when the other parents, despite not being able to reveal Naruto's Jinchuriki status, told their children to avoid the boy at all cost and try to be friends with the Namikaze child, many greedy parents hoping for a marriage between their children in order to gain some control over the Uzumaki clan inheritance and the Hokage too. Because of this, Naruto was ignored by everyone, well, almost everyone except by 3 people: Hinata Hyuga, Suzuki Uchiha, and Itachi Uchiha. Suzuki and Itachi were both the sons of Kushina's closest friend, Mikoto Uchiha. Itachi was 6 years older than Suzuki and Naruto, as well as considered a prodigy like Minato and Kakashi Hatake, Minato's only living student. However, despite this, along with the usual Uchiha stoicism and arrogance, Itachi was very polite to people and was a kind older brother to Suzuki and, in a way, to Naruto as well. As for Suzuki, he and Naruto had more of a rivalry friendship but were on good terms nonetheless. However, Itachi had left the village a year ago when he was accused of killing a fellow clan member, Shisui Uchiha. Though no body was found and there was no solid proof that Itachi did it, there was also no proof that he was innocent. So he was labeled a missing nin and was to either be captured or killed when spotted, much to the anger of the Uchiha clan head Fugaku Uchiha, Itachi's father, and the grief of Itachi's mother, Mikoto Uchiha. This event also made Sasuke a little bit closed off from everyone else besides his mother and Naruto sometimes, as he now felt like it was his duty to prove his brother's innocence, because he would never believe that his older brother, his idol, would do such a thing as killing a fellow shinobi. Then there was Hinata Hyuga, the heiress to the noble Hyuga clan. Naruto and Mito had originally met her when Hinata's mother, another good friend of Kushina's, met them at the park when they were 3. Mito had begun playing with some of the other children, leaving Hinata alone due to the Hyuga's shyness around other people. However, Naruto decided to play with her because she seemed like a nice person. That sparked their friendship, and so they would meet whenever they could. Of course, Hinata's father really didn't want them to play, since being the demon brat rather than the fourth son, such interaction might bring more shame than praise from the rest of the village. However, Naruto and Hinata continued to play, and as they got older, trained too, sometimes with Sasuke. Speaking of training, Naruto had to do it secretly and for his own safety. The former was because for some unknown reason until now, Minato and Kushina decided not to train Naruto but instead focused all of their attention on training Mito and becoming a ninja. In fact, they started when the twins were only 5. Despite all the begging to be trained as well, Naruto would always receive none and would then be sent to his room as a timeout. However, Naruto was a bright boy and a sneaky one at that, and thus had been able to get his hands on some scrolls and do secret training on his own. He was even able to learn the shadow clones and one of his father's prized techniques, the Raise-Non. As for the safety part, well, let's just say that Naruto needed more Umbu protection than his parents and his sister combined. Villagers and even some shinobi would sometimes try to beat him, especially if he wasn't with his family. Thanks to his training, he was able to hold back most of the assaults, mainly escape them, though it was difficult when shinobi were involved. Despite all that, Naruto had always hoped that one day he could truly be happy with his family and the village would accept him. But that all changed 3 years ago when he had accidentally listened in onto a conversation between his parents and godfather, Minato's teacher Jiraiya the Toad Sage. Back then, a 6-year-old Naruto had gotten up late one night to use the bathroom. After relieving himself, Naruto had noticed that the living room light was on, and there were 3 familiar voices in said room as well. Being curious, Naruto snuck downstairs to listen in on the conversation. What he heard was shocking. From what he could tell, his godfather was ranting, though quietly as to not wake Naruto and Mito, that Minato and Kushina were playing favorites between the twins just because Naruto's chakra couldn't suppress the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto couldn't believe it. He had the Kyuubi inside of him. His own father sealed the fox that nearly destroyed the village inside of him? Was that why he was hated by the villagers and shinobi and why his parents ignored him? Then the conversation got worse for Naruto when Minato and Kushina explained that they were concerned that Naruto might not be able to handle the Kyuubi's influence. If so, then Mito, with her special chakra and Fuinjutsu, would be able to keep Naruto in control if the day ever came. In short, as said by Jiraiya, Mito was basically Naruto's warden, something that greatly upset Naruto, not just because his parents were afraid but that they thought he was some kind of threat to the village and that his sister was supposed to keep him in line. His hope rose a little when Jiraiya brought up the question of just training Naruto to suppress and maybe even use the Kyuubi's chakra. However, Minato merely explained that they were thinking of letting Danzo handle Naruto's training, something that enraged Jiraiya and nearly caused him to shout. Naruto had seen the man named Danzo time to time, during when he and his sister would go with their father to work. There he would spot the bandaged man passing by, not even sparing his father a glance. Instead, the older man would look down at Naruto, his soul eye looking down at the boy as if he was a mere object that he wanted to obtain, not a human being. Combined with the dreadful aura around the man, Naruto made it a point to avoid Danzo at all costs. And judging by how badly Jiraiya was reacting to what Minato said, it was clear that Danzo was very bad news. It was at that moment that Naruto realized that he was no longer safe in the village and no longer safe within his own home. He had to leave. But he knew that just running away without a plan was suicide. That and the fact that he wouldn't last a day in the outside world with mercenaries, wild animals, and missing nin everywhere, followed by even getting past the guards around the village. So he decided to bide his time, train more until he could handle the world, and at the same time scan the walls of Konoha, the guard shifts, anything that could help him in his escape. And now, after 3 years of planning, it was time. At night, the entire village would be celebrating the defeat of the Kyuubi, as well as forming mobs to find him, and security would be lax. Even his family would be there, meaning Naruto could just slip through the night unnoticed. With that thought in mind, Naruto used a shunch into his house, finishing up the things he would need to bring with him. He paused as he looked at some paper, debating on whether or not to leave his family a letter. However, at the last second he decided not to. If they didn't care to give him attention, then they surely wouldn't care if he were missing. But this also meant he couldn't tell his 2 friends that he was leaving as well, because there was the chance that his parents might find out. With Naruto later that evening. It had been several hours since then, and Naruto was jumping through the trees, having already mastered the arts of tree climbing. However, he was also moving at a fast pace to escape his pursuers, 3 Chunins by the looks of them, one of them being Mizuki, his former academy instructor, as well as one of the more physically abusive of his tormentors. He had no idea how they spotted him leaving the village, but Naruto had no doubt in mind that seeing how the young blonde was leaving the village, this was the best chance they could get to kill him and not worry about suffering the consequences. What Naruto did not know, however, was in fact these 3 Chunins were persuaded by Danzo, who had a root agent watched the boy for the past several years, of simply capturing the boy and then staging it to look like Naruto was killed, and in the event that they failed or worse, captured, then Danzo could deny all claims of having been involved with them. However, if they did succeed, then Danzo would merely have them killed. One of them pulled out a kunai with an explosive tag attached to it and threw it. The kunai impaled itself into a tree that Naruto was about to land on. When it exploded, it knocked the young blonde off course and caused him to fall down towards the ground. Fortunately, Naruto managed to slow his fall by hitting some branches, though he gained a few bruises as a cost. He finally hit the ground, causing Naruto to let out a gasp of air. The blonde tried to get up, but the explosion and the fall left Naruto severely bruised, and despite the Uzumaki blood and Kyuubi's chakra healing him, getting his senses together, Naruto tried to get up but was sent back to the ground when a foot roughly stomped onto his back, causing Naruto to cough up some blood. "Oi Mizuki, don't damage it too much. Danzo-sama wanted the demon alive," one of the Chunins murmured to the silver-haired Chunin. Said Chunin just smirked before twisting his foot deeper into Naruto's back, causing the young blonde to cough violently. I know, but it doesn't hurt to at least get some fun while we're here. After all, I doubt dash." Mizuki's words were cut short as the third Chunin was vertically cleaved in two. Blood gushed from the man as his halves collapsed to the ground. "What the hell?" Mizuki yelled, his gaze darting from the body to Naruto, who was barely conscious. "Holy shit, did the demon?" Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. Mizuki spun around to see the other Chunin with a huge gash across his chest. Blood sprayed from the wound, and the man fell, a look of sheer horror on his dead face. Panic-stricken, Mizuki forgot all about the injured boy and desperately searched for an escape route or the unseen attacker. Who the hell is there?" he shouted, wildly brandishing his kunai, just before a blow to the back of his neck knocked him unconscious. Standing over the fallen man were 3 figures in black cloaks and hoods that hid their bodies and faces. "Get rid of the 2 bodies," the leader commanded the second person. As the second person worked, the leader approached Naruto's still form. Bending down, the leader checked for injuries but could already see them healing. Gently picking the boy up, the leader glanced at the third person, who was doing something to Mizuki, before joining the others after the bodies were gone. They vanished in a flash. The next day in Konoha. It's surprising how much commotion a person who is ignored or hated can cause when they disappear. It wasn't until sometime in the afternoon, after recovering from a wild adult party the night before, that Minato and Kushina realized their son was missing. After checking his usual hangouts, which took a while, as they didn't know them well, and asking the few people he associated with, then having the Inyazuka clan and skill trackers search the village, they concluded Naruto was gone. He either ran away or was kidnapped, both unsettling possibilities. They immediately sent out groups of ninja to find him, though some were secretly hoping to kill the boy due to their biased belief that he was the Kyuubi. Minato even sent word to Jiraiya to keep an eye out for Naruto. 2 days later, a team led by Kakashi Hatake found a clue. Kakashi's Ninkins located the scent of 3 people, 1 alive and 2 dead. He arrived to find an unconscious Mizuki and the charred remains of what were likely 2 other Konohanin. While searching the area, Pakun, Kakashi's most trusted Ninkin, found a patch of dried blood and later identified it as Naruto's. "And so I brought Mizuki back restrained to be questioned, since he likely had something to do with Naruto's disappearance," Kakashi reported to the Yondaime Hokage, Jiraiya, and Hiruzen Sarutobi. "I've also sent the ashes to the hospital to identify who they were, but they were most likely Konohanin." Minato nodded, a solemn look on his face as he rested his chin on his hands. "We should be getting a report from the interrogation and torture department soon, knowing Ibiki and Inoichi," he said. "Were you able to track Naruto with the blood?" Minato asked hopefully. Kakashi shook his head, to his sensei's dismay. "No, we looked everywhere but couldn't find a lead. The only reasonable explanation I can think of is that someone else took Naruto." Minato sighed, a crestfallen expression on his face, knowing Kushina would be even more depressed. His attention was then drawn to a knock at the door. "Come in," Minato said. The door opened, and Inoichi and Ibiki entered, the latter with a file under his arm. Both had grave looks on their faces as they bowed to the Hokage Sensunin. "Anything?" Minato asked hopefully. Ibiki and Inoichi exchanged looks before facing the Yondaime. "Well, what we found is that Mizuki and 2 other Chunin were definitely sent after Naruto, though whether to retrieve him or kill him." Inoichi winced as Minato's killing intent briefly filled the room. When it subsided, the Yamanaka continued. "However, we've determined that he, or any accomplices of his, didn't take Naruto, as it appears he was knocked out from behind." But besides that, Ibiki walked forward and placed the file on Minato's desk. We found some shocking things inside Mizuki's head. Apparently, despite being a former Chunin Academy teacher, he had an important role in something else. Confused, Minato opened the file, with his student, sensei, and predecessor looking over his shoulder. What they saw shocked them and made Minato's eyes narrow in anger as he growled. Danzo. Miles from Konoha, an unknown location. Naruto's eyes fluttered open to an unfamiliar room. It was stark white with plain walls, a table, 3 chairs, and a bedside table. On the table was a tray of food and drinks. Ignoring the tray and his rumbling stomach, Naruto scanned the room for any clues as to his location. Where am I?" he whispered to himself. Suddenly, a door that hadn't been there before opened, and a tall man stepped in, about the same size as Naruto's father. He wore a black cloak and hood, but his mouth, with a small scar across his lip, was visible. "Ah, you're awake," the man said upon seeing Naruto. "And your wounds have healed, too, which is to be expected." Naruto said nothing, keeping a wary eye on the stranger. "You should probably eat before we go. We wouldn't want you to collapse from hunger after just waking up." Naruto's stomach growled again at the mention of food, but his gaze remained fixed on the man. "Go," Naruto repeated. "Go where?" "There are some people that want to see you, Naruto," the man replied as he walked back out of the room. "Don't take too long, or you won't be able to meet them." He closed the door behind him. Alone again, Naruto stared at the door and then the food, repeating this several times. Finally, he decided he might as well eat and began to devour the food. A few minutes later, having finished the entire tray, Naruto got out of bed, put on his sandals, and went to the door. He peeked his head out and saw the hooded man waiting. Upon seeing him, the stranger said, "Okay then, follow me." The two walked down a dark, seemingly endless hallway. Naruto was still unsure about all of this but realized that if this was a trap, he had a better chance of escaping out here than in the room. He was already thinking of ways to escape the stranger, despite being outmatched in size, skill, and being unarmed. His thoughts were interrupted when he spotted a light at the end of the hall that was growing closer. When they reached the light, it momentarily blinded Naruto. When his vision returned, he was alone in another room. This one was larger and wider with several lights on, allowing him to see most of it. "So you're Naruto-kun?" a new voice asked. Naruto looked around, trying to find the source. He stopped when 2 rows of lights turned on, revealing a long red rug leading to a throne-like chair at the end of the room where a person was sitting. "Welcome, Naruto-kun," the man said. "My child born from the swirling tides." Konoha 16 years later, Hokage's office. Minato sighed as he read documents from the Civilian Council. They were all about opening a new mall under their jurisdiction that would be funded by money meant for the academy and orphanage. Naturally, Minato denied it and had his shadow clones handle the rest of the papers from the council. "Thank Kami, I finally found a way to beat paperwork," Minato thought, turning his attention to mission reports, border patrol updates, and Jiraiya's spy network. The last one was especially important, as even after 16 years, the Toad Sage was still searching for clues about Naruto and Danzo's new hideout. Danzo. Minato muttered, the name tasting like poison. He still remembered what they discovered while interrogating Mizuki and other shinobi working with him. Apparently, Mizuki was a link between Orochimaru, one of Konoha's greatest traitors, and Danzo. Mizuki and the 2 dead shinin were also under Danzo's orders to retrieve Naruto if he ever tried to run away. Combined with the fact that Danzo's route was still active and conducting unapproved missions, it was enough to bring the village's wrath down on the Warhawk once his bases were located. Danzo and his few surviving followers fled, no doubt having prepared for such an event. All that remained after the raids were the bodies of dead roots, inhuman experiments, classified files, and about 100 orphans taken from small towns in the Land of Fire and other countries. Many of the children were weak and mentally scarred from Danzo's training. It took about 2 years for most of them to live normal lives. The only one who was still functional, though with a few issues, was a boy named Sai. But what enraged Minato, Kushina, Tsunade, and even the Uchiha clan more, were certain files Danzo had. Danzo was apparently responsible for Shisui's death, having stolen one of the Uchiha prodigy's Sharingan to use its special technique, the ultimate genjutsu, Kodaamatsukami. Danzo later used Itachi as a scapegoat to blame him for Shisui's death. And if that wasn't bad enough, Danzo's personal lab contained dozens of Sharingan looted from dead Uchiha, and notes showed that Danzo had Orochimaru infuse the eyes and the first Hokage's DNA into him. This allowed him to not only use Shisui's genjutsu once a day instead of once a decade but also have spare Sharingan to use the forbidden Izanagi technique. And speaking of genjutsu, Minato read in one of Danzo's journals how he would actively use Shisui's eye to try and manipulate the Yondaime and his wife into handing him Naruto to mold the boy into a weapon. However, their strong wills made it difficult, so he simply used other plans, revealing the child's inability to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra while suggesting he could help the boy control it. Naturally, this enraged both parents, and Kushina began to cry over what they had done and what they should have done, which had now cost them one of their children. With so much evidence against him, Danzo was labeled an S-rank missing nin for inhuman experiments, associating with a village traitor, plotting against the Hokage, and authorizing missions that could have caused Konoha a lot of problems. To add insult to injury, there was still the organization Jiraiya discovered a year after Naruto ran away. The Akatsuki, as they were called, were a group of S-rank missing nin who were hunting the Baijuyu. Two of its members were Orochimaru and Itachi Uchiha, with the latter defecting while the other remained a spy. Even though Konoha no longer had a Baijuyu, it was clear this organization could cause many problems for every village. So Minato decided that once more information was gathered, he would send a warning to the other villages. Minato's thoughts went to his remaining child, Mito, who had changed drastically after Naruto ran away. Even before that, Mito had always cared for her brother and was never a spoiled brat despite the attention she got from her parents and everyone else. She began to build a name for herself as the second coming of the Red Death, also known as the Red Storm, especially when she dealt with those who insulted her brother. She was assigned as an apprentice to both Jiraiya, to Kushina's disapproval, and Tsunade, who had returned to Konoha after accepting Minato's offer to start a medical ninja program. The other kids in Mito's graduating class were also becoming famous in their own right, many of them Jonin or Takebutsu Jonin. Two outstanding ones were Hinata Hiwaga and Suzuki Uchiha. Suzuki, whose desire to find his brother, make Danzo pay for framing Itachi, and desecrating his deceased kin, along with becoming a strong shinobi, a promise he made with Naruto during their childhood rivalry, was placed in the bingo books at 15. He single-handedly defeated the former IWA nin bomber Deidara, an Akatsuki member, and the former Sunanin Sasori of the Red Sand, another Akatsuki member, while on a mission to rescue the 5th Kage, Gaara, the Jinchuriki of the Ichibai. How the Jinchuriki became the Kage was thanks to Kushina. Gaara's village, Suna, had allied with Oto, led by Orochimaru, to invade during Mito's first Chunin exam 4 years after Naruto ran away. The result was Orochimaru being heavily wounded, the 4th Kage murdered by the snake, both villages low on manpower, and Gaara being calmed by Mito and Kushina's special chakra. Kushina later adjusted the seal on the boy to contain his Baijuyu. This act and her consoling, as a former Jinchuriki herself, changed Gaara for the better. Back to Suzuki, news of Deidara's death was leaked to IWA, and a bounty was placed on the young Uchiha's head, marking him as an S-rank ninja. Suzuki's reputation only grew when he gained the Mangekyo Sharingan after his older brother died at the hands of Kisame Hashigaki, another Akatsuki member. In his final moments, Itachi requested his eyes be transplanted to Suzuki so his younger brother could gain the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and protect both the clan and the village. Suzuki became especially known for his use of Amaterasu, one of the 3 Mangekyo Sharingan techniques, earning him the name Konoha-kin, Konoha's demon flames. On the subject of Akatsuki, Jiraiya's reports noted that the only remaining members were Kisame, their scout and spy Zetsu, and the shadow leader, a man who goes by the name of Madara Uchiha, the same man who released the Kyuubi 25 years ago. Next was Hinata Hiwaga, who now headed the Hiwaga clan. Naruto's disappearance had affected her deeply, so much so that she held a great grudge against the Yandame's family for always ignoring Naruto in favor of Mito. From that day on, she strengthened her resolve to change her clan's ways, a promise she'd made to Naruto when they were children, and her shyness and stuttering slowly faded. Her first major accomplishment was during the Chunin exams when she defeated her prodigy cousin, Niji. Over time, she rose to become one of Konoha's most powerful kunoichis, alongside the likes of Tsunade, Kushina, and Mikado. When she turned 18, she challenged her father, Hayashi Hiwaga, for clan leadership after her constant refusals to marry. Hayashi accepted, thinking his daughter's new skills were no match for his own. The match ended swiftly, with Hinata overpowering Hayashi with her own created techniques, to the shock of the other Hiwaga members, with the exception of Hitomi, Hinata's mother, who had been watching Hinata train over the past few years. As promised, Hinata became the new clan leader, and her first decision was to remove the caged bird seal and unite the 2 branches of the clan. This caused an uproar among the elders and more traditional clan members, but Hinata silenced them by reminding them that as clan head, she had the right to make that decision and that the elders were there to advise her, not command her. She was currently listed as an A to S rank ninja in the bingo books as Konoha's deadly maiden. She still held contempt for Minato and his family, but kept it in check during meetings and missions. Minato's thoughts were cut off when he stopped at a report from Jiraiya regarding recent events in Taki. There were reports of raids by unknown people in various places within the small nation. Each raid was a step closer toward Takigakur, and now nothing had been heard from the nation or its shinobi village. While it was most noticeable in Takigakur, there had been smaller raids in both Earth and Lightning countries, both rivals of the Fire country, with less contact from the Earth country and almost no signs of IWA nins outside of the country. Kumo and most likely IWA were pointing accusing fingers at Fire country and Konoha, claiming they were responsible for these raids, despite similar reports coming from within the Fire country. But of course IWA and Kumo were probably just looking for an excuse to attack Konoha. Minato knew that unless they could find out who was behind this, another great shinobi war would begin, and there was a good chance that Konoha would be on the losing side, especially with Oniki, the san-named Tsuchikage, who couldn't forget that Minato had slaughtered over 100 IWA nins during the Third Shinobi World War. Minato had sent an Umbu squad under Tenzo to watch the border between nations in case IWA nins tried anything. Near the border of Earth and Fire Country, Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, one of the three Sannin and Minato Namikaze Sensei, was heading toward the border between Earth and Fire Country. Minato had sent him a messenger toad saying he had an Umbu squad near the border to watch for any trouble. Jiraiya had decided to check out what was going on in Earth Country and figured he would see if the squad had any information. However, mid-jump, a scent caught Jiraiya's attention, and his eyes widened. It was a smell he was all too familiar with, having survived 2 Shinobi World Wars, the smell of blood and decaying bodies. It was also coming from where the Umbu squad was supposed to be. Shit, Jiraiya cursed to himself as he took off like lightning, hoping he wasn't too late. But when he landed in a clearing, he saw he was too late. Lying before him were a dozen Konoha Umbu bodies, all covered with bruises, slashes, and blood, their armor and weapons shattered and broken. Some were so beaten down that they were almost unrecognizable. What the hell happened here? Jiraiya wondered as he examined the corpses, trying to find a clue as to who did this. It couldn't have been IWA nins, there would have been tons of earth lifted from their Doton jutsus, and these people were Konoha Umbu. It would take more force to take them down, but it appeared the Umbu didn't have a chance whatsoever. Jiraiya's thoughts were cut off when he heard a twig snap behind him. Spinning around, Jiraiya got into a fighting stance. "Who's there?" the Toad Sage demanded. The figure soon walked out of the shadows and into the light, making themselves visible. Jiraiya recognized the person and murmured with a dark tone, "You." Back in Konoha, Hokage's mansion. In his office, while reading more reports, Minato felt a slight but uncomfortable breeze hit his back, causing him to turn to look at the office's windows. But the windows, the same ones that overlooked the village, were all closed. His instincts suddenly went up, causing him to spin around, and find himself facing 7 cloaked and masked people. Their cloaks were all black with hoods covering their heads, and their masks were shaped like red spirals. "Who are you?" Minato asked, his body tensing, his hands moving under his desk, one to grab his special kunao and the other to activate a seal to alert his Umbu. "Don't bother," one of the masked guests said, the one in front to be precise. "You'll find that your Umbu bodyguards are unavailable." Minato just glared at them as his other hand finally found his kunao. However, the man continued to speak. "I must say, though, that it was unwise to allow your entire Umbu protection squad to guard outside the mansion, leaving you with no security except for the warning and Hirishin seals you placed inside the office." "Don't worry," Minato said as he got up slowly. "I've been in worse situations and still come out on top," the Yondaime Hokage said with confidence, but inside, he was still wondering if he should try to take on these guys or escape. He had no idea what they were capable of or how they got past the security seals. The fact that they outnumbered him didn't help either. The masked visitor cocked his head to the side, as if he didn't understand Minato's words. Finally, the intruder replied, "I see those are quite bold and arrogant words, and they will be your last, Minato Namikaze." He said the last part with a darker voice. "And here is the proof of my claim." Suddenly, the window behind Minato shattered, and an object flew by the Yondaime Hokage and crashed on the other side of the office. It was so fast that Minato only now realized what it was. "Tenzo!" the Yondaime exclaimed as he saw the cat mask-wearing Umbu he had sent to the borders leaning against the wall, with a large crater and blood smeared on the wall behind him. The Umbu had several cracks on his armor and mask, along with multiple injuries, including a hand-sized hole in his chest. "He fought valiantly," the same masked intruder said while looking at the downed Umbu. "Even when he was the last one standing, while the others were long dead, he did not relent until the last of his strength was gone. He is a worthy shinobi and should be commended for his bravery." Then he looked back at Minato. "He is also an example that, despite all your efforts, every plan you can create, all the skills you utilize, your very confidence shall crumble before a greater might, our might. Because this is a declaration of war, for in 7 days, Konoha, followed by the rest of the shinobi world, shall be destroyed by the Tachiagari." When he finished, the masked invader realized that Minato was no longer standing behind his desk. Turning their heads, the masked people saw that Minato was kneeling beside Tenzo, laying him down on the ground. "Ah, as the stories say, you move like a yellow flash, Minato Namikaze," the intruder said. He got no reply from the Hokage, save for a deadly glare from Minato that would have made lesser men drop to their knees. The intruders, however, seemed unfazed as the lead one replied, "That look, it means you understand the full weight of our words, and also, you want to know who we are. But you of all people should know that we're not going to tell, even though it's right in front of your eyes. Farewell, Minato Namikaze, Yondaime Hokage." The intruder said just as he and the other masked intruders began to disappear into thin air, not allowing these people to get away. "Wait!" Minato yelled as he charged at them with a raise-nan already in his hand. But by the time he reached where they once stood, they were gone, leaving Minato alone with just himself and Tenzo. Suddenly, the door slammed open with several jonins led by Hiruzen running into the room. Minato! What happened? We all saw something flying into Tenzo, Hiruzen exclaimed in shock as he noticed the wounded Umbu. Calming his thoughts, Minato turned around and looked at the assembled shinobi. Hiruzen-sama, I'll explain later. Right now, we need to send word to all teams out of the village to come back immediately. Also, contact Jiraiya too. Wait, a voice said. Everyone looked at its source and was surprised to see that Tenzo had taken off his mask, revealing his bloody and bruised face. His eyes were white, as if he was barely hanging on to life. Yandame-sama, I need to tell you. Don't speak, Minato said urgently as some jonins tried to help Tenzo, but were interrupted immediately by the near-death Umbu. No, Hokage-sama, my Mokutan, they were. But before he could finish, his body went limp, and his eyes closed. He lost consciousness, Yandame-sama, we need to get him to the hospital, a jonin said. Then do so, Minato yelled, earning quick nods from two jonins who soon shunshin away with the seriously wounded Umbu. The rest of you, send word to the clan heads of an emergency meeting. No exceptions and no lateness, go now. The Yandame ordered the remaining jonins. Sir, they all replied in Shunshin as well, leaving only Minato and Hiruzen, the former looking outside the destroyed window with a grim look on his face. Minato, what in the world just happened? Hiruzen asked as he looked at his successor. Minato was quiet for a few seconds before looking back out at the village. War has been declared on us, Hiruzen, and I'm not sure if we can win this one. Unknown location. In a dark, barely lit room, the seven-masked people from Konoha reappeared out of thin air. The one who had been speaking to Minato took off his mask and pulled down his hood, revealing his face. He was a young man, perhaps in his 20s, with fair skin. He wore a black knee-length trench coat and black pants with red trims, and dark blue sandals. The man's hair was a smooth red that went down his back, and his purple eyes were dark as he looked at a throne at the end of the room. We have returned, Your Majesty, the man said, bowing toward the throne, followed by the others. Some lights came on, pointing toward the throne, which was made from bright white stone, yet had no design at all, on top of a set of stairs and a man sitting on it. The man appeared to be in his late 30s to early 40s. He had long, dark red hair that went down his back, along with a thin red beard that connected with his mustache. His skin was tan, and he had red eyes. The man wore a long black cloak that draped over his shoulders and was held together by a large golden button on the left side of his chest. Underneath his cape, he wore a double-breasted, black, thigh-length trench coat, with matching black trousers and black sandals that went up to the top of his lower legs. On his coat and trousers were dark golden trims. Welcome home, my loyal men, the one dubbed as His Majesty said in a deep voice. I assume everything went well, Shingen. The man known as Shingen raised his head as he looked at the sitting man. Yes, sire, we've delivered the message to Minato Namikaze, as well as having dealt with the Umbu sent to watch the borders between Earth and Fire Country. Though I must ask, sir, was it really necessary? The older man merely walked off his throne and down the stairs. Waving his hand, he dismissed the others except for Shingen. Konoha has become arrogant over the years, Shingen. Arrogant people do not understand their own weakness through words alone, they need physical evidence in order to see the truth of their vulnerability. Shingen thought about that before accepting the truth of his leader's words. Very well, Your Majesty, forgive me for questioning your intentions, Shingen said while bowing. There is no need to apologize, Shingen. I know that you disapprove of killing unless it serves a purpose, and you merely wish to ease your mind, the leader said, and then he began to walk toward his throne before pausing. Also, while you're here, go and tell the captain of the Kyo's Hoku in Earth Country to round up some ninjas from IWA, with soul seals placed on them too. We're going to need the fodder when we begin invading Fire Country in order to cut off aid for Konoha. Are you sure that's wise, Your Majesty? Shingen asked as he watched his leader sit back down. You do know there are still some escapees, including Oniki's son and granddaughter. It doesn't matter, the leader replied as he tapped the left armrest. Suddenly, a screen appeared in midair, revealing the ruins of a village, with stones and smoke everywhere. Iwagakur and the rest of Earth Country already belong to us, he said with an evil smile on his face. Very well, sire, Shingen said, then bowed before Shunshin away. Once he had left, the leader made a wave of his hand, and suddenly a man, wearing a tight black trench coat, pants, and a cap on his head appeared, kneeling by the leader's side. Contact my son. Tell him that I need him to return here for a new assignment as well as his partner, the leader said. Yes, sire, the messenger replied and disappeared, leaving the leader alone to his thoughts. Jiraiya had just said before he had to jump back to avoid a hail of shuriken. The toad sage landed on a tree branch and looked back down at his attacker. Said person was a man, and despite the fact that he wore a blank black mask and a hood over his head, Jiraiya could tell that he was a young man, maybe in his 20s. He wore a black trench coat and matching black pants and sandals with red trims on the coat and pants. He also had a hood on his ankle-length cloak that blew in the breeze as he stood before the toad sage. On the back of the cloak was a red swirl. "Who are you?" Jiraiya asked, watching his opponent's next move. The attacker vanished without a word, only to reappear directly in front of the Toad Sage. "He's fast," Jiraiya thought, backflipping away from a swift kick. Upon landing, he blasted fireballs at his foe. The masked man then showed a red swirl crest on a wristband. The crest flashed, revealing a katana with a silver blade, a golden guard, and a red handle. With the sword drawn, the masked man sliced through the fireballs, charging straight at Jiraiya. This time the Toad Sage was ready, forming hand signs for ninja art, wild lion main jutsu. The Sunin's long white hair then morphed into the head of a lion and charged at the masked man. Jiraiya watched his attack come within inches of his opponent, only to gasp in shock as the attacker swatted it away like it was a mere fly. How? Jiraiya thought, barely avoiding a sword thrust from the masked attacker. The Toad Sage then sent a strong kick at the man's chest, only to have it deflected by an invisible force. What is this, some kind of armor? The thought crossed Jiraiya's mind before his opponent's punch sent him crashing through the trees until he hit the ground. With the Sunin temporarily stunned, the masked man lunged once more, sword raised to deliver a killing blow. Jiraiya had just regained his footing as his opponent neared. He quickly began to form hand signs, but his foe was faster. Shit, not going to make it. And sure enough, the sword pierced Jiraiya's chest just as the Toad Sage made the last hand sign. But instead of dying, Jiraiya poofed into smoke, surprising the masked man. Before he could react, a shadow appeared above him. He looked up to see Jiraiya bringing his hands to his mouth. "Katan Great Dragon Fire Jutsu," Jiraiya yelled, firing a huge fireball shaped like a Chinese dragon's head at his enemy. The masked man had no time to counter as the attack consumed him and the area in a giant bonfire. Jiraiya landed on a tree branch nearby, looking down at the fire slowly turning to smoke. Seconds later, his sharp eyes caught a figure leaping out of the smoke. The masked man, his coat burned away on the left side, showing his toned, tan chest and arm. The masked man was about to act when a hand suddenly grabbed his right arm. Both the Toad Sage and the masked man, though it was hard to tell with the mask, were startled by a third man's sudden arrival. He wore the same outfit as the masked man but was unmasked, a hood hiding his face. "Enough," the man said, not releasing his grip. "Our orders are to return to the palace, not engage the enemy. Is that understood?" The masked man did not reply, he just relaxed his arm. The hooded man then let go of his grip, looking down at a shocked and confused Jiraiya. "Be grateful, Jiraiya, you get to live for a little bit longer, and then you will fall with the rest of Konoha." With that, they vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving a worried-looking Toad Sage. Konoha Council Room, Day 1. Minato waited until all the clan heads, including Nara clan head Shikaku and the Umbu commander, Minato's predecessor Hiruzen Sarutobi, and his former teammates, Homura Mito Kato and Koharu Yuditen, had arrived and were seated. "I thank you all for coming at such an unexpected time," Minato said, sitting down and activating the privacy seals around the room. The Yondaime Hokage then spoke. "I summoned you all here because war has been declared on us." The clan heads were all surprised, shocked that war had been declared on them out of the blue. It was Shikaku who finally asked, "I'm assuming that this has to do with the explosion from your office earlier today?" Minato nodded. "Yes, a few hours ago, 7 masked people entered my office by unknown means and apparently killed my Umbu stationed outside the mansion, along with the Umbu team I sent to the borders between the Fire and Earth countries, since the thing that crashed through my office was Tenzo." "Wait, Tenzo?" some asked. "You mean the one with the Shodame-sama's cells implanted in him?" "The very same," Minato said before continuing. "After that, they declared war on us, calling themselves the Tachiagari and saying they would invade us in 7 days. When he finished, Minato noticed that Koharu and Homura stiffened at the name and silently conversed. Whether or not anyone else caught on was unknown as Fugaku soon spoke. "Why the hell would they tell us when they would invade?" Fugaku asked. "It would make more sense for them to launch a surprise attack while we are unprepared than to tell us the day of the attack, which allows us time to be ready." "You have a good point, Fugaku-san," Shikaku said, gaining everyone's attention. "However, perhaps it was their intention to tell us when they would attack. War isn't just about numbers or surprise, it's also about strategy. In this case, they've used psychological warfare on us." "What do you mean, Shikaku?" Choza asked his old friend. "You believe they won't attack us?" "It's not about if they will attack us but when they will attack," the Nara explained. "I believe they told us the number of days until their attack to make us panic. How do we know they will truly attack us in 7 days? The attack could be in 5 or a month. They aren't trying to warn us, they are trying to confuse us and make us worry so we'll be less prepared. We should try and find where their base is," Hinata suggested. "That way we can stop any invasion from happening." "We still don't know if they will attack us," Kohara commented. "For all we know, this could be a bluff to make us waste our resources to weaken us." "No," Minato said gravely. "They fully meant what they said. And if they intended to assassinate someone, they wouldn't have to make a sudden appearance in my office. The fact that they infiltrated Konoha, got into my office, and killed a dozen Umbu shows that this is a serious matter, one we must deal with immediately. There were several nods in agreement to this before Shibi spoke. Did Tenzo-san learn anything about these mysterious attackers? Many of the clan heads and the two elders noticed the sad looks on Minato and Hiruzen's faces. Tenzo only managed to tell us that they did something with his Mokutan just before he succumbed to his wounds. This made everyone except the current and retired Hokage gasp, while a few just widened their eyes in shock. Tenzo-san is dead? Inoichi murmured, still unable to believe that someone as strong as Tenzo had been killed. Minato nodded. Yes, he died a few minutes before reaching the hospital, the yondaime said sadly. But then he got serious, a sign to the others that this was not the time to mourn. But now we must stay focused. I've already sent word for all shinobi out of the village to return immediately. I've also sent word to the fire daimyo to inform him of what has transpired. As Shikaku-san said before, we do not know if the enemy truly intends to attack in 7 days, and informing the populace might cause unnecessary panic. As such, I want all of you to inform only Jonin-level shinobi of your clans, while other non-clan Jonin shall be told as well. Takebutsu Jonins and Shinins will only be told that guard duty shall be tripled and should remain tight-lipped on this, understood? Everyone nodded, and after a few more things were discussed, Minato ended the meeting. Being one of the last to leave, Hiruzen was just getting up when for a brief second he felt a sting of pain on the right side of his chest. This did not go unnoticed by Minato, who was just walking past his predecessor as this happened. Hiruzen-sama, is everything okay? Minato asked worriedly. At first, the former Hokage didn't respond to Minato. Instead, he rubbed the fabric where the pain came from with his hand. He knew the only thing there was a scar from a deadly fight long ago, but the fact that it briefly stung him was odd after all these years. Brushing it aside as a mere coincidence, he got up, replying to Minato's question. It's nothing, Minato, I just moved my body too fast. Guess I should be more careful with this ancient body of mine, Hiruzen said with a low chuckle. Minato just looked at Hiruzen carefully before nodding. Then the two left the room, never noticing a large shadowy figure moving along the floor, then the wall, toward the ceiling before it vanished. Back at the Tachie-gari headquarters. I see, the leader said, looking at the two people before him. They were the same two who had confronted Jiraiya. The masked man still wore his mask, but his hood was down, revealing spiky red hair. Beside him was the other man, who looked to be in his early 30s, with tan skin, some red fuzz on his chin, and red spiky hair with a ponytail down his back. His eyes were so dark purple they almost looked black. You did well to avoid further conflict with Jiraiya, Kane. I can't afford either of you being at anything but full strength when we make our move on Konoha. Kane bowed. Thank you, father. The leader then turned to look at the masked man. And what is your excuse for initiating unnecessary contact with the S-level threat Jiraiya? The leader asked, looking at the masked man. For a while, both men looked at each other without a single word being said between them. Then, without a word, the masked man turned and walked away, ignoring the passive look from the leader and the annoyed look from Kane. The leader merely looked at the spot where the masked man once stood. A smirk then appeared on his face. Such a rebellious attitude. We'll have to keep an eye on him so he doesn't get himself killed by accident, he commented. Kane nodded in agreement with his father as the man got up from his throne and walked behind it. True, but he is improving. I think seeing the Toad Sage made him snap. Other than that, he's doing well, he said before pausing. He then continued, speaking of watching, I got a report from Tekubi on my way here. Really? The leader asked as a window suddenly appeared before him. It showed that it was nighttime where they were, with a full moon. The sounds of moving water in the distance could be heard as well. What did he have to say? Besides the fact that Minato informed the clan heads of our declaration, the two elders were acting suspiciously when our empire was brought up. Tekubi wasn't able to get close enough to hear them, but it will probably put them at odds with the Hokage, Kane reported. I see, the leader said, still looking up at the moon. I expect that whatever they were discussing will put them at odds with Hiruzen. But in the end, just like in the past, Hiruzen will forgive them, especially if it gives them a fighting chance, the leader said with a chuckle. Kane was silent for a moment as he looked at his father, while the man looked up at the moon. Finally, Kane broke the silence. Father, what do we do about Obito, Uchiha and Orochimaru? Their presence could still hinder us deeply, especially if Obito makes a move against Nagato and AIM. Orochimaru is of no concern to us. We can eliminate him whenever we want, the leader said. However, Obito will be a bother if left unchecked, so we'll have our spies keep an eye out. For now, our focus is on Konoha, so have everyone be ready when the time comes. Now, leave me. Understood, father, Kane said with a bow and left the room. Once he left the room, he was standing in a plain white and blue hallway with pillars on both sides. He had just made a turn to the right when a voice from behind said, Yo, so what's up with the boss right now? Kane turned around and found himself looking at a man who was about the same size. He had short, spiky red hair that was shaved a bit on the sides with a ponytail going down to his shoulders. His skin was a bit tan, and he had 3 scars over his left eye. He wore the same outfit as Kane, with the black, ankle-length cloak held together by a red swirl crest where Kane had his. Underneath, the man wore a zipped, black, long-sleeved leather jacket and baggy pants with knee-length guards over them. However, his most noticeable feature was a wide, vicious grin on his face. "Jikyaku, what are you doing here?" Kane asked the Kurikishi, the name for the Tachi-Agari's elite fighters. Jikyaku merely chuckled as he walked up to Kane, looking at the door to the Emperor's room. "Relax, will ya, Kane-san? Can't a guy just walk wherever he wants to?" Kane narrowed his eyes at the man, not liking how Jikyaku was acting. "Your orders, Jikyaku, were to assist with hunting down the remnants of Iwa's forces. His Majesty does not wish to have rebels threatening us," Kane said, calling his father by his title whenever he's in public. Yeah, I know, but I got bored with killing those weak-ass pussies, so I decided to come back to see if there was anything more interesting to do," Jikyaku responded as he prepared to enter the Emperor's room. But he was soon stopped when he and Kane felt a powerful wave of chakra coming from the room. The force was powerful enough to crack numerous areas on the walls. After a few seconds, it stopped, and everything was back to normal. Jikyaku just stared at the door for a moment before backing away. "TCH, guess he's not in a visiting mood," he said before walking away. "Oh well, guess I'll ask him later," the tall man said. "Probably for the best," Kane said as he looked at Jikyaku and then at the door. "After all, today is that day. He always wants to be alone then." Kane finished. Jikyaku said nothing but just walked off, doing a quick wave goodbye. Kane, however, stared at the walls as the seals appeared and began repairing them. He then continued walking down the hallway, mumbling to himself. Might as well see what the Gaki is doing right now. Hopefully, he isn't getting himself killed. Leader's meditation. Inside the throne room, the leader remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the moon with an expressionless face. The only movement he made was a slight downward glance toward the endless body of water below. Closing his eyes, an image of a woman with long red hair and a dark blue kimono, her back to him, filled his mind. A salty sea scent drifted to his nose, and a small smile touched his lips as he thought, soon. He continued to stare into the night sky. Kushina's solitude. At the Namikaze estate, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze was preparing dinner as her family returned. Her eyes held a dull, lifeless quality that often appeared when she cooked for family gatherings. The reason was a familiar, painful one, the absence of her son, Naruto. He had run away, and despite her friends' reassurances, she blamed herself entirely. The past few years had been a struggle against depression, but she persevered for the sake of her daughter, husband, and friends. Yet, the guilt of her son's disappearance was a constant, deep-seated ache in her heart. A crash from the living room broke her thoughts. "Minato-kun? Mito-chan," she called out, assuming one of them had just arrived and knocked something over. When no one answered, Kushina grew curious. She cautiously entered the living room, searching for signs of an intruder. The room was empty, save for an overturned picture frame on the floor, the likely source of the noise. She carefully approached, bent down, and picked it up. As she righted the frame, she looked at the photo it held. The picture showed 4 redheads, 2 women and 2 men. The older woman, with a sweet smile and light purple eyes, had her red hair tied in a ponytail. The younger female had a rounder face, light skin, and long red hair that fell down her back. She wore a purple and yellow kimono and smiled widely. The young man next to her, a year or 2 older, had tan skin, a small smile, purple eyes, and spiky red hair with a small ponytail. He wore a dark blue kimono with green stripes. The final person, an older male, stood beside the elder woman. He had long, dark red hair reaching the middle of his back, tan skin, and purple eyes. A small smile graced his face as he wore a black kimono with red stripes. Kushina stared at the picture, lost in memories from years past. She eventually snapped out of her daze and placed the frame back on the shelf. Tachi-Agari's strategy. At Tachi-Agari base, the leader sat in silent contemplation, considering his next move. It was the 4th day since the declaration, and surprisingly, not much had happened. Word had spread that Konoha was preparing for war, prompting most villages to adopt a wait-and-see approach with the predictable exception of Iwa. Kumo, Iwa's ally, had made several attempts to infiltrate Earth Country to gather intel, only for their teams to be slaughtered. The leader knew this would not sit well with the 4th Raikage, but he would be dealt with in due time. For now, Tachi-Agari's focus remained on Konoha. He pressed a button on his throne's armrest. "Have we heard anything from Beizo yet?" he asked. "Sir, Beizo-san reports that he and the 1st Kyo's Hoku have encountered no significant threats, only the usual wandering bandits. They had a swift skirmish with a team of Chinin a few hours ago, but the details were deemed unimportant and were not reported," a voice responded. However, he did report an hour ago that they've detected several high-level chakra signatures, most at Low Jonin, with one at High Jonin moving toward Konoha from Ricefield Country. They are currently 5 miles away and await orders. I see. Tell him he has my permission to investigate. If Bezo determines they are a threat, he may act as he sees fit, but he is to report anything noteworthy," the leader said, getting up as the "yes, sire" came from the other side. He suddenly phased out of the room, reappearing in a different location, a small wasteland that looked like the center of an apocalypse. Uplifted rocks, deep craters, and powerful cyclones raged. These winds fanned large bonfires, creating violent waves in a vast man-made ocean. The sky was filled with dark clouds, from which bolts of lightning fiercely struck the ground. "Father," a familiar voice said. The leader looked to his right and saw Cain sitting on a rock, his cape off his uniform. He, too, was watching the destruction, which was being caused by a younger man who was putting on his shirt and jacket. The young man had spiky red hair and tan skin. "You've improved, Naruto-kun," the leader said as he approached Naruto and Cain. "I see no reason for you to continue training, given how powerful you've already become." Naruto looked at his grandfather as he put his cloak back on. "I will never stop training until I see no more enemies who pose a threat," he replied. The leader nodded, acknowledging the fitting response for someone who had lived the life they had. "A good response, Naruto-kun. You have shown the will of a child of the swirling tide better than anyone in our clan. When the time comes, I expect great things from you, my boy." Naruto bowed and walked away. "He's advancing faster than we anticipated," Cain said to his father once Naruto was out of earshot. The leader looked at him. "Is he? So you believe he might finish before the 7-day prediction?" he asked. Cain shrugged. "It's possible. In fact, I'd give him until tomorrow to be completely finished and reach the final stage." He paused and looked at his father. "Though that doesn't mean he'll be able to control it right away. He's not like grandfather, and then there's Kurama, or Kuwabai, inside him." The leader nodded, remembering the fox and his own father, Cain's grandfather. "Indeed, but they are similar in personality." He stood up. "For now, we will proceed as originally scheduled and only act if we are given an opening." With that, the leader walked away, followed by Cain. Konoha on high alert. Over the next few afternoon hours, teams of Konohanin could be seen returning to the village. They had received orders from the Hokage to return to the village, which was being placed under martial law in preparation for the upcoming invasion. Only Jonin-level ninja, Umbu, and clan heads were informed of the latter detail, as the Hokage wanted to avoid unnecessary panic. However, an announcement was made that evacuation drills would begin tomorrow. Meanwhile, two people, Shikamaru Nara and Koji Akimichi, the heirs of two of Konoha's clans, walked toward the famous restaurant Hot Flames. Shikamaru wore a bored, lazy expression, while Koji munched on a bag of chips. "This is so troublesome, I can't believe we have to deal with all this," Shikamaru mumbled. His friend just chuckled. Both had become Jonin, and Shikamaru was preparing to take his father's place as the village's Jonin commander. Both had been informed by their fathers, along with other high-ranking clan members. They were heading to the restaurant to meet up with friends, all of whom were also Jonin or Umbu. A few minutes later, they entered the busy restaurant, filled with civilians and shinobi. The two friends turned left toward a large table where several people were already seated. Their third teammate, Ino Yamanaka, along with Kiba Inyazuka, Sakura Harano, Niji Hayuwaga, Tenten Higurashi Hayuwaga, who took the surname Hayuwaga after marrying Niji, Shino Abarame, Rock Lee, and Hinata Hayuwaga. "You're late," Ino shouted at her two teammates as they walked over. A tick mark formed on her head when neither of the boys looked apologetic. "Pipe down, you troublesome woman," Shikamaru said, sitting down by the window, followed by Koji. "Dad needed me for some things concerning the upcoming invasion," he explained, recalling his father and the Hokage discussing the information Jiraiya had just brought back about Earth Country being taken over by the Tachiagari. Ino just rolled her eyes and returned to her menu. Suddenly, Lee spoke up. "Is it wise to order now? We are still missing some of our youthful comrades." Suzuki-kun was on a recon mission near Rice Country with his Umbu team. "He'll probably be back by tomorrow," Sakura said, remembering that her husband had left a few days ago. Saikun was sent on recon patrol around the Fire Country for signs of a large force. Ino informed the others about her husband's current status. "Troublesome," Shikamaru muttered, staring out the window at the clouds. Koji reached for another chip but noticed someone else was missing. "Hey, where's Mito-san?" the Akimichi asked. "The last time I saw her was when I was delivering some reports to the Hokage," Hinata answered. "She and Kushina-sama were heading out to set up barrier seals around the village's walls to increase our defenses." "Hokage-sama isn't taking any chances, is he?" Kiba commented, followed by a bark from his canine companion, Akamaru. "Can you blame him?" Shikamaru responded. "We're talking about a group of people who managed to kill a team of Umbu and enter the Hokage's office undetected." He paused to take a drink of water. "Furthermore, we have no idea what the enemy is truly capable of or the size of their forces. For all we know, we might be dealing with a force larger than an entire nation or the size of a small village. Either way, we'll probably find out for sure in 3 days." The others nodded solemnly as they began discussing other topics. Shino, who had been listening silently, was suddenly captivated by something outside the window. He caught a glimpse of a black bird in the sky. A messenger bird, he thought, watching it fly toward the village. If you looked closely, you could see a scroll carrier strapped to the bird, a common sight for messenger birds. The messenger bird Shino had spotted continued its descent toward Konoha, heading for the older, more lavish part of town. As it flew closer, it was suddenly pounced on by an unseen figure, and the two landed on a nearby roof. The bird was flapping its wings and making noise, trying to escape, but a few soothing hums and a reassuring pat from the figure calmed it down. This allowed Mito Uzumaki Namikaze to safely undo the seal on the bag and pull out the scroll. "Sorry about that," Mito said to the bird before letting it go. The girl had grown a lot in the years since her brother left. She was almost an exact replica of her mother, except her red hair was neck-length and tied in a ponytail. She wore a fishnet shirt under a form-fitting purple shirt and a short-sleeved red jacket with blue lines and a hood. Mito's short black pants were hidden by a red skirt, both reaching her knees. Her forehead protector was wrapped around her head, and a katana was strapped to her back, slightly covering the Uzumaki clan symbol on her jacket. She and her mother had just finished placing the last barrier seals on the village wall before heading back to the Hokage mansion. That's when she spotted the bird, and her curiosity led her to follow it while her mother continued on. Watching the bird fly back to wherever it was going, Mito looked down at the scroll she held. "I just wanted to see what you were carrying," she murmured as she opened it. The first thing she saw was a certain name, and her eyes widened in shock. "This is, shit, I need to tell Dad," Mito said, dashing toward the Hokage mansion. Back in his office, Minato, along with Kushina and Jiraiya, were deep in discussion. "So we still have no idea who these people are, what they're capable of, or even where their base is?" Kushina asked. Jiraiya nodded. "I've contacted every source I have and still couldn't figure out a damn thing. All I know is that they managed to invade Earth Country and take over Iwagakure unnoticed. They also seem to be able to do something to Tenzo's Mokutan and use incredible teleportation jutsu to get past high-caliber security seals like yours, Minato," Jiraiya explained. "Also, the other nations and villages are starting to watch us since we've been gathering all our forces back to the village. Unless these guys make a move, another village will. And we have enough problems as it is with Orochimaru," Minato added. "We can't count on that snake missing a chance like this to strike at us. I just hope that." "Dad," Mito yelled as she broke into the room, startling the three adults who were already in there. "Dad, you have got to read this," the young redhead stated as she went over to her father's table. "Mito-chan, what is it? What happened?" Kushina inquired of her daughter as the girl gave Minato the scroll. "You know that one messenger bird I saw when we were coming back here?" Mito asked her mother. When Kushina nodded, Mito said, "Anyway, I found out the scroll was meant for those two old sacks of bones, Kamaru and Koharu, but the person who sent it is what you need to look at." Whatever else was going to be said was abruptly stopped by a loud slam. Jiraiya, Kushina, and Mito all turned to look at Minato, who was now standing over his desk, his two fists on the piece of furniture. Lying under him was a now wide-open scroll, and if one were to look at the man's face, they would see a look of shock and anger on the Yandame's face. "Bastards," the young Hokage mumbled. "Minato-kun," Kushina said, trying to understand why her husband was so upset. Minato did not respond to her. Instead, he looked up at Jiraiya, a grave look on his face. "Jiraiya-sensei, can you take a team of Umbu and go to the homes of Homura and Koharu?" Seeing the seriousness on his former student's face, the Toad Sage nodded. "Sure, kid, I'd be glad to do it, but what's the reason?" Jiraiya asked. Minato just glared back down at the scroll before he responded. "The reason is that those two are now guilty of communicating with an S-rank criminal and putting the village's security at risk, in two separate areas within the Land of Fire. A few miles away from the borders of Ricefield Country, a group of 20 people wearing black outfits, which consisted of long coats, trousers, fingerless gloves, hoods over their heads, black masks, and all of them wearing a one-shoulder strap bag, could be seen on top of an edge. On the masks was the kanji 4 Sikh except for one man, who was in the front and standing exactly over the edge. He wore a similar outfit as the others but with several different characteristics. His coat did not have a hood but instead a small black cape that went down to his waist. His gloves had the finger parts, and his red hair was shaved around the sides of his head, leaving only the top with hair. He also wore a black hat with a peak and round spectacles. Finally, he had a red belt with a buckle that looked like a dragon. He was currently looking through a pair of binoculars. Through them, he could see a small team of Konoha Umbu jumping through the trees back to the village. "Well, it seems that we've found the source of those large chakra," the man said as he gave the binoculars to one of his men. "Identify anyone who is of importance," the man said. "Sir," the subordinate said. Then he took out a rectangular object from his pocket and clicked on it. This caused the object to light up, as did the binoculars. Soon, the images of the 7 umbu down below appeared and began running a scan of the umbu. Finally, it stopped at one, causing the subordinate to look up at his superior. Bezo-san, the umbu with the crow's mask and their captain is Suzuki Uchiha, one of the S-level threats. Bezo pushed his glasses up. I see, this is an interesting turn of events. Then he looked at the Kyohoku team. Well, our orders were to eliminate them anyway, but inform His Majesty of this piece of information as we make our descent. And with that, he jumped off the edge toward the forest below, followed by the rest of the Kyohoku. Elsewhere, south of Konoha, a group of people could be seen walking through the forest of the Land of Fire instead of taking the dirt-filled road a mile or so away from them. Many of them appeared to be in their late teens or 30s, though it was hard to tell since they all wore blank white masks. Some wore white or black cloaks over their bodies while others had different outfits on but with a tanto strapped to their backs. However, there was one person that stood out from all of them. In the center of the group was a person that wore an entire gray cloak that covered his body and face. The person was apparently old, as his visible left hand was carrying a cane he was using to walk. The man paused for a moment before looking up at the clear sky, with the clouds floating up ahead. But for a moment, the man thought he saw some kind of ripple in the sky before it quickly disappeared. Is everything okay, Danzo-sama? A young man with short black hair, wearing a mask with goggles, asked. Danzo stared up at the sky for a second longer before looking back forward and continued walking. It's nothing, Torun, let's continue toward Konoha. Back at the Tachiegari base, the leader was once more silently seated on his throne, an empty expression on his face as he sat in silence. Standing around his throne were several aides that were not the least bit disturbed by their master's silence. Suddenly, a voice could be heard within the room. A message from Bezo-san to His Majesty. The voice said, Bezo-san and the first Kyohoku have reported that they've identified the large source of chakra as a team of Konoha umbu. Furthermore, it has been confirmed that one of the umbu is the S-level threat Suzuki Uchiha. The moment that the voice finished that statement, a sinister smirk slowly made its way onto the leader's face. Then he quickly got up, startling his aides a little. I guess it's time to get going, the leader said. Sire, an aide asked. To where? The leader gave the man a brief look, causing the aide to flinch a little. But the leader made his way down his throne while speaking. To where? Why, to Konoha, of course. With Naruto-kun's training nearly complete before the original schedule, and Suzuki Uchiha outside the village, this is a good chance to invade Konoha. Kane. Sire, the man replied as he suddenly appeared before the leader. Notify the Kurikishi and have them get ready for immediate transport to Konoha. I want preparations made for today or tomorrow, no exceptions. The leader said. Kane bowed. Understood, sire, but what about Naruto and I? The leader smirked. You two shall come with me. I plan on heading to the village an hour before the others. The leader replied before continuing to walk. The Tachiegari will now invade Konoha. Konoha, Interrogation and Torture Department, Day 5 morning. The former teammates of Hiruzen Sarutobi, Koharu and Hamaru, were both sitting in an empty room with impassive looks on their faces. They knew that there were umbu outside the room guarding it and preventing any attempts of escape. It was only a matter of time that they would be captured, and they accepted that fact with open arms. They lived long lives and had nothing to regret. The doors soon opened, and coming through were Minato Namikaze, Hiruzen Sarutobi, 3 umbu, and Konoha's 2 top interrogators, Inoichi Yamanaka and Ibiki Marino. The 2 elders could not help but flinch as the Hokage's menacing glare looked down at them, as if attempting to consume their very souls. It was one of the reasons why Minato Namikaze was so feared by his enemies, not just his techniques but when his eyes took on a lifeless yet terrifying dark blue orbs, as if the enemy was being consumed into an endless dark pit. He certainly did deserve the title of Hokage. Once one of the umbu closed the door, several seals were activated, making sure no one came in or went out. Then Minato sat down opposite of the 2 elders while Ibiki pulled out a file. We've already searched your homes and found a lot of evidence of you two communicating with the S-rank criminal Danzo Shimura for a period of time, in which you shared with him important information such as our current shinobi strength, relations with other villages and nations, and finally the current situation between us and the force known as Tachiegari, along with more topics dating back during the later years of the Saname Hokage's rule. As Ibiki read off the 2 elders' crimes to the village, Hiruzen could not help but feel ashamed of his former teammates. He recalled back when he first took the mantle of Hokage after the death of his sensei, the Naidame Hokage. He made Homura and Koharu his advisors, his time with them as a team convincing him that he could trust the 2 to help him guide Konoha. However, he soon realized that their views were different from his, where he disapproved of using his own ninjas as weapons or doing things against human nature. His former teammates were more militaristic like Danzo, which may have been the reason why they sided with him a lot. However, to hear all of this, how they constantly did actions behind his back and even now were dealing with the now S-rank criminal, Hiruzen had trouble even looking at them. After Ibiki finished reading his report, Minato turned to look at the 2 elders, who still had their stoic faces on, clearly not withering under the numerous accusations. Despite all this, I am willing to give you two the benefit of the doubt if you explain why you're still in contact with Danzo. Without even talking amongst each other of who should speak, Hamaru went first. While we admit that we had no idea of the experiments that Danzo had done, or his dealings with Orochimaru, we knew that Danzo's loyalty was to Konoha first and foremost. He and Root did many things that the village could not have done publicly, but it was all for protecting the village. In fact, I have no doubt that Danzo would face the Shinigami himself if necessary. Koharu took it from there. Even when forced out of Konoha, Danzo still made sure the village was safe, which was one of the reasons why we were still in contact, and given the current situation, we felt that it was important to tell him everything that we learned since the enemy's attack a few days ago. She paused before adding, which is also why we wanted to keep his return a secret until it felt like it would be good to inform Yandame-sama. Minato and the others did not seem surprised by the part of Danzo coming to Konoha. The letter that Mito had intercepted was to inform the elders of which direction Danzo would approach Konoha from. Minato sighed as he got up from his chair. While I admit that your reasons were noble, it does not change the fact that you two were and even now going behind the Hokage SPAC for so long, as well as withholding information of a S-rank criminal's location. For that, you will be retained within a secure facility until this crisis has passed before being judged of your crimes. And with that, Minato and company left the room while the Umbu escorted the two elders toward the facility. As the Yandame Hokage and company were leaving the INT facility, an Umbu suddenly appeared, kneeling before his leader. Hokage-sama, we've just received a report from the southern part of Konoha's gate that Danzo and a large group of his root force has been spotted. That made Minato and the others gasp at the news. I didn't expect Danzo to arrive here so soon, Minato thought to himself. But there's no way that he would just show himself, knowing what will happen due to him being an S-rank criminal. So does that mean? Minato looked back at the Umbu. Have the guards made any attempts to apprehend Danzo? No, Hokage-sama. Actually, this was reported by a passing-by Jonin when he went to check on the patrol team, only to find out that the entire patrol team was taken hostage by Danzo's root, the Umbu reported. What? Minato yelled, but quieted down as the Umbu continued speaking. One of the hostages was given back to deliver a message that Danzo only wants to speak with you and Sandaime-sama. The Umbu then revealed a scroll. This scroll was in the returned hostage's hand. We believe it's from Danzo and most likely his demands. With Suzuki's Umbu team somewhere else in the Land of Fire, Crow, aka Suzuki Uchiha, was jumping through the trees of his home nation with his 6-man Umbu team behind him. His team had been posted near the borders of Rice Country to see if they could find out any information of Orochimaru's latest actions. However, they had been recalled back to Konoha due to the news of a possible invasion approaching the village. So now we find Suzuki's team heading back to the village at full speed. Suzuki did a quick turn around to make sure his team was present before facing the front again. That's when the Uchiha noticed that up ahead a flock of birds could be seen flying from some trees nearby into the sky. Strange, Suzuki thought to himself. Could something have startled them or something? Is something wrong, Captain? One of the Umbu asked Suzuki. Suzuki was silent for a few seconds before replying, no, it's nothing, let's keep moving to dash. But Suzuki's sentence was cut short when he felt a large killing intent nearby, and suddenly there was a scream from behind. Suzuki stopped in his tracks and turned around to see two of his men being pierced by two white beams as they were sent down toward the ground below. What the heck? One of the 5 remaining Umbu, who wore a wolf mask, cried before someone appeared right in front of him, one of the Kyohoku to be precise. The man pulled out a katana from a crest on his right wrist and swung it at the Umbu, who managed to deflect it with his ninjato. But then the Kyohoku slammed his left hand into the Umbu's chest and murmured Onmitten Red Bolt Shock, and suddenly a red ball of energy literally tore through the Umbu's chest, killing him instantly. Suzuki and the 3 remaining Umbu watched as their third comrade was killed right before them. That's when Suzuki heard something whizzing past the trees, several noises. All of you, get down, Suzuki shouted as he jumped towards the remaining Umbu just as several projectiles struck them and caused a massive explosion. A minute later, the large plume of smoke was surrounded by the rest of the first Kyohoku and Beizo as they watched the smoke, with the latter having a pleased look on his face. Well, I have to admit I was kind of disappointed at how fast the Umbu were killed, but the goal was completed, Beizo commented. However, that was cut short when several large purple arrows appeared out of the smoke, toward the first Kyohoku, impaling several members while the others managed to dodge. Beizo-san, look out, a Kyohoku member shouted as a purple arrow flew straight toward the Iryu. But instead of jumping out of the way, Beizo raised his left hand and with a strong swing, he smacked the arrow to the side, causing the arrow to impale into a nearby tree. There were also barely any marks on Beizo's arm. His glasses dropped a little, showing his dark purple eyes. It seems like I spoke too soon, he said as the smoke finally disappeared, revealing Suzuki's purple complete Susanoo, covering him and the 3 other Umbu. Looking up, Suzuki now had his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan activated, glaring at Beizo. Looks like I made the young man angry. When Suzuki launched a large arrow at him, Beizo had just said that. This made Beizo reach for a sheathed weapon hanging on his belt. When he touched it, a saber appeared in Beizo's right hand, with said weapon cutting through the arrow. Then Beizo brought his sword up to block an attack by Suzuki, who had deactivated his Susanoo and appeared right before Beizo, his Chokuto drawn. Beizo-san, one of his men yelled as he saw the Uchiha engaging the Iryu. Without even looking at them, Beizo said, "Instead of worrying about me, you should deal with those remaining Umbu that escaped." The Kyohoku members that survived Suzuki's surprise attack turned and saw that the 3 Umbu had indeed escaped during the confusion. Without another word they headed off in pursuit of them. "I admit it's admirable of you to act as a decoy to buy your men time to escape," Beizo said as he pushed Suzuki back, making the Uchiha land on a nearby branch. Suzuki merely raised his weapon and took a fighting stance. "As a captain, it's my job to make sure that my men are safe. I have no doubts that they can hold their own against your men. You, however, I can tell, are a problem that I can only deal with." Beizo smirked as he raised his own weapon and took his cape off. "I see, you take the position very highly. But my orders were to make sure that you die. Your men are of no concern to me, just you." Konoha, Hokage Mansion, Council Room. The room was entirely empty, save for a small number of people. On one side were Minato Namikaze, who sat in a chair, with Hiruzen Sarutobi and Jiraiya standing on both sides of him. Across from them was a half-cloaked Danzo Shimura, who, like Minato, was sitting in a chair, with 2 root agents standing beside him. "As agreed to your demands, Danzo," he said the name with venom. "We each brought 2 people with us to act as bodyguards in this room. Said room is now covered in privacy seals and chakra nullifying seals. Only someone, the person who placed them, can deactivate them, and said person is outside right now with the door covered by a lock seal that only I can undo." "And the rest of my men?" Danzo asked emotionlessly as if he didn't care. It was Hiruzen who answered this time. "They're being watched by several teams of Umbu and Jonins at one of our training fields with a barrier around the area. And as we promised, no harm shall come to them unless provoked." Danzo nodded before replying, "I see. Despite the negative emotions you and everyone else are radiating towards me, Minato, you can keep yourself in check. Though I'm sure the current crisis has helped in that bit." Minato frowned at that and his hand twitched a little. "I would like to see you try and say that to Kushina-chan," the Hokage said, remembering how furious Kushina was when she not only learned that the elders were still communicating with Danzo, but when she saw said man, she nearly went Kyuubi on the old man and had to be held down by multiple shinobi. "If you had given me the boy the moment that you found out he could not control it, then I wouldn't have to prey on yours and Kushina's fears," Danzo replied. Noticing the somewhat confused looks on the 3 Konohanins' faces, Danzo elaborated. "Shisuizai has," he paused before continuing, "or had the ability to manipulate a person's thoughts without them realizing it. But there are certain cases where if a person's will is strong enough to resist, then the I won't work, so you have to focus on something that is already there." "What's that supposed to mean?" Minato asked, despite the unpleasant feeling inside of him along with the rage increasing too. "Simply put, I had to focus on a feeling or thought you were having and give it a push in my favor." He kept going despite the killing intent radiating off of Minato now. "In other words, deep down inside of you was a bit of fear that one day the Kyuubi would break out of Naruto or your own son would go on a rampage dash." His sentence was cut off when Minato was in front of him with one of his signature kunao in his hand, with the blade touching Danzo's throat. The rest of the occupants didn't stand idly by. Hiruzen had his hands on both Minato and Danzo, trying to stop any unnecessary bloodshed, while Jiraiya had taken a fighting stance in front of the 2 root agents. Danzo still had his emotionless face while Minato's was one of utter rage. "Minato, now is not the time for this," Hiruzen said to the young Hokage. "We must remain focused on the current task at hand. Think about the village and what would happen if a fight were to happen right now." Minato's eyes were still on Danzo, though his body relaxed at hearing Hiruzen's words of reason. Slowly he moved back from Danzo, lowering his kunao, and returned to his chair, followed by Jiraiya and Hiruzen. The Sandaime Hokage looked at Danzo, his eyes steely gaze at his former rival. "Now I think it might be better if we get back to the topic at hand, the Tachiegari." "Of course," Danzo said as he began removing the rest of his cloak that covered his right side. What the 2 Hokage Sansanin saw shocked them. Instead of the transplanted arm of the Shodaime cells along with the multiple Sharingan that they had read in the reports, was instead a metal arm that ended at the shoulder. As the rest of the cloak came off, it revealed that Danzo's right side of his face was heavily scarred and the right eye was now covered by an eye patch. The Warhawk noticed their reactions and merely said, "What you see is the result of gaining the information we managed to acquire," he said as he tossed a folder towards Minato. "And that is the amount of info we have on Tachiegari." Minato raised an eyebrow as he inspected the folder, which only had about 2 dozen or so papers within it. "This is all you managed to get? I thought there would be more, seeing how it's you." A small frown formed on Danzo's face at the subtle jab, but kept his composure. "Then you can see how well hidden they are. All we know so far is that their forces are quite large, about the same size as a hidden village or maybe even greater. But the most important fact is that the entire force are in fact members of the Uzumaki clan. That caused Minato, Hiruzen, and Jiraiya to look at Danzo in complete and utter shock. "You Uzumaki clan?" Minato asked, unable to believe that his wife's clan was alive, their enemy and according to Danzo were the size of a hidden village. "That can't be possible," Hiruzen murmured. "Even if there were survivors after the destruction of Uzushio, there's no way that they could have gotten back together during the chaos, let alone gain such numbers as you claim." Danzo sent a hard look at Hiruzen. "You shouldn't sound so surprised, Hiruzen, after all it's your fault Konoha and all the elemental nations are in this predicament." "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Jiraiya roared, feeling the need to defend his sensei. "The only reason why we weren't able to aid Uzushio during the Second War was because Kusa, Aim and Kiri were blocking our forces while Iwa and Kumo moved to attack Uzushio. There was no way we could even expect so many villages to align together to take down one village, let alone push through them in time to aid Uzushio." "I'm not talking about that," Danzo said, breaking Jiraiya's rant. "I'm referring to something else and Hiruzen knows what it is," the Warhawk said as he looked directly at the former Hokage. "When word reached our ears that Uzushio was destroyed and survivors of the Uzumaki clan were reported to have escaped and headed towards Fire Country, I had given you counsel about it to find them and bring them to Konoha." Hiruzen nodded, remembering that time. "Yes, but they were so spread out from the destruction of their village and we were still recovering from pushing through the force that held us off that there was nothing we could do," the Sandaime Hokage replied. "And it's because of that does Konoha face destruction, along with what happened 3 weeks later," Danzo added. 3 weeks later, Minato asked, "What happened 3 weeks later?" "Hiruzen along with myself and a detachment of shinobi ran into a group of survivors, but instead of welcoming us, they attacked us, nearly wiping us out until we managed to defeat them and force them back," Danzo said. It was then that Hiruzen's eyes widened at what his former comrade was referring to. Jiraiya and Minato noticed that the Sandaime Hokage had a dark and faraway look in his eyes. "You realize it now, don't you, Hiruzen?" Danzo commented. "That this is no one else's fault but your own, because 51 years ago you failed to kill that one man, Tachie Gary Base. An order to all Kurakishi," a voice announced as people's silhouettes could be seen walking through the hallways. "An order by His Majesty. All Iryu are to report to the Gate of the Void for immediate departure. Word has been received that S-level threat Suzuki Uchiha is engaged with our army. As such, His Majesty has declared that the Tachie Gary will now invade Konoha." Up on a balcony, overlooking a large gate, the leader could be seen with Kane behind him. A sinister smile was on the leader's face as he watched the gate glow brightly, consuming the two and the other people gathered. Before the light fully consumed them, he said, "It's time for the children of the swirling tide to rise once more." Konoha, Northern Gate entrance. Standing on the walls that surrounded the village of Konoha, 2 Chunins were looking out towards the forest of the Fire Nation. Both shinobi appeared young, around their early 20s, as they had relaxed and bored looks on their faces. However, one of them frowned when he saw a reflection in the sky, something that his partner caught. "What is it?" the Chunin asked. The second Chunin chewed his teeth before answering, "Well, it's been bothering me, but I swear now and then I see some kind of invisible wall a few miles off from the village." The man said. "You don't have to worry about that," a third voice said. Both Chunins turned around and saw another shinobi, a jonin to be exact. "That's a barrier that was set up by Kushina-sama, Mito-sama and several others of our village's seal experts. The barrier is designed to deflect attacks and deny unwanted people or foreign chakra signatures from entering the village. If that fails, then the second defense will kick in." "What's the second defense?" the first Chunin asked. "The second defense is the original barrier set up around the village during its founding," the jonin explained. "Like the first barrier, it strengthens the wall from attacks and the barrier team can sense if an intruder enters the village," the jonin finished. "Cool," the second Chunin exclaimed, hearing how well the village's defenses were. "So that means we'll be prepared when the enemy comes and won't have to worry about being taken unprepared." The jonin nodded. "Yeah, this definitely shows that Konoha is not a village to be messed with. With seals and barriers like those, it's impossible for the enemy to surprise us." "I see," a fourth unknown voice replied. The 2 Chunins and 1 jonin looked up and were shocked to see the Tachie Gary leader floating above them in the air. "That sounds like quite the defense, if the enemy didn't have a way to penetrate it," he said the last part mockingly. "What the?" the jonin shouted in shock as he and the 2 Chunins backed away from the floating man. How the hell did he get past the barriers? His question remained unanswered as he and the others were consumed by a large explosion, followed by a massive flash of light, with many more following after it all over the village. The leader turned around to look at the Hokage monument. "War sure is rough," he said to himself as large pillars of blue light began to appear all around the village, followed by the screams of shock and panic. Shinobi, both on and off duty, were rushing off to grab their gear while clan members were heading towards their respective compounds for orders about the current situation. Those with civilian families were trying to lead their loved ones towards the emergency shelter. Many of the shinobi were heading towards the pillars of light. Back with Minato, who had returned to his office in the Hokage mansion after his meeting with Danzo, looked up in shock at the pillars. What is this? Minato murmured to himself. They look like pillars of blue fire, Jiraiya commented. No, Hiruzen replied, getting looks from the other two. They're pillars of dense chakra, it must be how they penetrated the barrier so easily. Suddenly 5 Umbu appeared in the office, kneeling before the Hokage. Hokage-sama. One of the Umbu yelled. I know, Minato shouted. Send out orders, I want all Genin-level shinobi to take the civilians to the emergency shelter. Find Tsunade, tell her she's in charge of the hospital and to organize the Mednins immediately. Have all Chunin and higher shinobi to head towards the pillars and prepare for battle. Also I want Shikaka Nara to take command of the eastern part of Konoha, I'll take command of the western part. This may be Konoha's most important battle ever. Hi Hokage-sama. The Umbu all cried as they shunshin out of the office to relay the orders. Minato then turned to face Jiraiya. Jiraiya-sensei, I have feeling there are going to be some enemies that will stick out from the others, you think you can handle them? The Toad Sunin smirked at his former student before heading off. Who do you think you're talking to, kid? I'm the great Jiraiya-sama. There's nothing I can't handle, I'm going to Minato. Hiruzen said, already removing his cloak, revealing his ninja outfit. If the person who lead the invasion is who I think it is, then I'm the only one who can deal with him. The former Hokage said with a tone that left no room for doubt. Hiruzen. Minato said as his predecessor took off towards the village. The Yondaime Hokage sighed to himself and two vanished in a yellow flash. Namikaze Estate. Mom, Mito cried as she ran towards her parents' room after seeing the pillars of chakra appearing all over the village. She already had her katana strapped to her back and her gear all set and ready to go. I'm here, Kushina's voice replied. Mito looked up and saw her mother walking out of the living room in her Jonin outfit and half of her red hair tied in a ponytail. Strapped to her back were 2 ninjato and a wristband on her left wrist with the Uzumaki crest hanging from. Mom, did you see what's happening? Mito asked as she followed her mother out the door. Of course I did, Kushina replied as she and her daughter stepped out of the door. Then she activated the house's defense seals. Let's get going before it's too late, and with that they took off. To be able to break through that S-level barrier Mito and I designed, Kushina thought to herself. There are only a few people I know who can do such a thing, and they're supposed to be dead. Southeastern section of Konoha. Genma, Reito, Izumo, Katetsu, and a dozen more shinobi of various ranks from Chunin to Jonin stood before a glowing pillar. Zeji, anything yet? Genma asked. Zeji, a Chunin, closed his eyes for a moment, but a frown creased his face when he opened them. Still nothing. This pillar of light, this chakra, it's messing with my sensing. Muttering a quiet curse, Genma turned back to the pillar. We have no clue what might be inside, so be ready for anything. A chorus of yes or nods came from the shinobi. Zeji, with his eyes closed again, focused all his concentration on the pillar, attempting to pinpoint a presence within it. Finally, he felt something, a distinct chakra, separate from the pillar itself. It was silver. I've got something, he shouted. It's a different chakra source and it's massive, high Jonin level. Genma nodded, eyes fixed on the pillar. At first, nothing. Then, a blurry image began to solidify inside. As it sharpened, Genma realized it was a person, the enemy. I see him. Attack, he yelled, and the shinobi prepared to charge. But before they could move, a thick beam of white energy erupted from the pillar, striking Genma. It instantly vaporized his right arm and a section of his chest. Coughing blood, Genma lost consciousness and crumpled to the ground. A shinobi shrieked, clearly inexperienced. Genma-san was. Reito cursed under his breath, his black katana in hand as he stared at the pillar. Damn it! Get ready, everyone, he commanded, raising his sword. Right! Izumo and Katetsu cried out in unison, their kunao held high. But before they could react, a man grabbed each of their faces and slammed them hard into the ground, knocking them out. The man was so fast that he got past Reito's attempted parry and slashed him across the chest. Reito collapsed, shocking the remaining shinobi. The attacker, cloaked in a Kurikishi uniform, a waist-length coat, pants with red trims, and black gloves and sandals, stood over the defeated Konoha ninja. As the hooded man prepared to lower his hood, Zeji cried out with a hint of fear, "Get him!" He and the remaining shinobi charged in a desperate frenzy. My apologies, the man said, pulling back his hood to reveal tan skin, a red mohawk, and purple eyes. The orders are to kill you all. With that, he charged. All over the village, similar events were unfolding as invaders easily overwhelmed and defeated Konoha shinobi. Elsewhere in the Uchiha compound, another pillar faded as Shingen stepped out, his face hidden by a hood. He looked at the assembled shinobi, mostly recently promoted Chunin with 2 or 3 jonin, including Inabi Uchiha, a skilled kenjutsu user. Shingen was unfazed. Cower in fear, Konoha, the Uzumaki said as the pillar disappeared. The Kurikishi have come to purge you. Inabi glared at the redhead's bold statement. Don't act like you're above us, intruder. If you think you can just show up in our compound and take on all of us, you're underestimating the Uchiha clan, he retorted, gripping his sword to hide his shaking hands. With his Sharingan activated, Inabi saw Shingen's massive chakra. It's about as large as Fugaku-sama and Suzuki-san's. They have the most chakra in the clan. If that's true, why are you shaking? Shingen asked, walking toward them. The younger shinobi subconsciously took a step back. You speak as if you're prepared for this, like it's some kind of game, not a life or death situation. What foolish thinking. The war has already begun. You bastard! Inabi shouted, charging with Tekka and Yashiro, all of them intent on killing. But before any of them could get close to Shingen, the sound of snapping wind was heard, and all three Uchiha fell to the ground with deep cuts on their bodies. Shingen stood in the middle of them. Apparently, you aren't prepared for war, he said, looking at the now terrified Uchiha. In another part of the village, a mile or two from Genma's group, Asuma Saratobi looked down at the bodies of several shinobi, his face unreadable. He then heard a nearby explosion and turned toward the sound, a look of concern on his face. That's where Genma and the others are, he thought just as a presence appeared in front of him, making him tense up. Across from him, standing over the dead bodies, was another invader. He was a man, a few inches taller than Asuma, with tan skin and curly red hair styled into small spikes. He wore black visors with red trim that matched his black and red striped jumpsuit with small sleeves and baggy pants, all covered by a kurikishi cloak. You okay? The invader joked. The look on your face makes me think someone died. Is that the case? Asuma spat out his cigarette and looked back at the Uzumaki. Not really, I doubt they were killed so easily, he replied. The spiked hair Uzumaki smirked, showing off his black braces. I'll bet they are. Zessen is over there, and if they aren't dead, he screwed up. He'll get a huge scolding back home. The third Hokage's son frowned, digging his hands into his pockets. You don't sound like you have much faith in your comrades. That's a bad sign for how this is going to turn out for you. The invader cocked his head and scratched it with his left hand, which now had rings on each finger. What's that supposed to mean? You saying you're going to kick my ass? Asuma looked down for a second as he pulled out his trench knives, already channeling wind chakra through them. He then raised his head and glared at his opponent. Let's see, you guys declared war on us, invaded the village, and are killing our friends and loved ones. His killing intent surged at the last part, startling the Uzumaki for a moment. You don't honestly think I'm just going to let that all go, do you? Asuma's voice was dark. The invader stared at Asuma for a moment before his smile returned, this time wider and more menacing, his own killing intent rising. Well then, Gora Uzumaki, accept that challenge, you arrogant bastard. In the market district, a girl no older than 19 let out a battle cry as she raced through Kanahanins, easily cutting them down with a deo in her hand. She wore a female version of the kurikishi outfit, a black and red striped thigh-length trench coat with a miniskirt and a cap on her head, her long red hair flowing behind her with her cloak and knee-high sandals. A Chinin watched her cut down two more ninjas and gulped. What the hell is this kid? She's cutting through us like we're fruit, he yelled, though he still looked scared, his kunao raised. Another ninja with a katana replied, don't lose focus. She's only one person. We can still take her down if we work together. Just as he finished that sentence, the girl charged him, her deo ready. He didn't realize she was upon him until it was too late, but a blur appeared between them, delivering a swift kick to her stomach. As she was pushed back a few feet, she looked up to see her attacker was Tsumin Yazuka, with her ninkin, Kuromaru. Samsama, the two shinobi shouted in surprise as Tsum was joined by her children, Kiba and Hana Inyazuka, along with their ninkin, Yakimaru, and the three Himura brothers. Several more members of the Inyazuka clan arrived after them. Kiba blinked, seeing their opponent. A kid! We came all this way just to fight a single brat, he exclaimed in annoyance, Akimaru barking in agreement. Hana shot a quick glare at her little brother. Don't get cocky, Kiba. This girl's chakra is large enough to be high jonin level. The way she's killed all these shinobi with ease means she's not a pushover. Her three ninkin growled at the girl. Your sister's right, Kiba, Tsum said, getting her children's attention. If she was sent with the other invaders, we can't take her lightly, despite her appearance. The Inyazuka matriarch stated, Kuromaru barking with her. The girl just looked at the new arrivals, then smirked and got into a stance. So I'm fighting a bunch of mutts? This will be interesting, she said with glee. Near the emergency shelter, things weren't going any better for Kanaha's forces. Monster, a ninja screamed. The monster was another kurikishi, with truly menacing features. He wore the standard uniform, his entire body covered by a cloak and an ankle-length black and red striped trench coat, and appeared to be floating slightly. His dark red hair was smooth and went down his back, and he had pitch-black eyes with a mask covering the lower part of his face. Surrounding him were 10 floating, thorn-like objects, several of which were impaling Kanahanins. The ground was littered with more bodies. None of our attacks seemed to be working on him, another ninja exclaimed, backing up with sweat on his face. And we can't even touch him without those thorns impaling us. They kill you on contact, a third ninja commented as a certain sound grew louder. And another thing, the same shinobi said as screams could be heard, why does a person start screaming like that whenever they die? The question went unanswered as the Iria slowly approached them, a blank look on his face as his thorns dropped their recent kill. Shit, this guy is too much for us. We have to get out of here, a shinobi cried, running toward the shelter, the others slowly following him. Wait, don't run, the last standing ninja said to the others. If we leave this post, hundreds of villagers will be killed by this man. It's our duty as shinobi to protect them at all costs. Just as he finished, several small explosions popped up around the Kurikishi, covering him in smoke. The ninjas looked up to see Sai riding one of his ink birds. Sai-san, the brave ninja said as the ink user jumped off his bird and landed. Sai took a moment to look at the smoke, then back at the survivors. He gave them a reassuring smile. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here, but you did well holding him back. I'll take it from here. The ninjas were shocked. But Sai-san, you don't seriously mean to fight him on your own, a ninja exclaimed, as if the thought was suicide. Sai turned to face the smoke again as it began to clear, the Iria's silhouette appearing. If you guys want to help, make sure no one reaches the villagers. My job right now is to ensure this person doesn't even get near them, Sai said, pulling out an ink brush and one of his scrolls. He didn't listen to their responses, his eyes focused completely on the Iryu, who had fully stepped out of the smoke with barely any injuries. The center of the village. The area was completely deserted, all occupants had fled to emergency shelters when the pillars of light appeared. Not a single bird or squirrel was in sight, just dead silence, until Minato Namikaze appeared out of thin air. He held one of his special kunao in his right hand, his eyes scanning the area as if searching for something or someone. As expected, you got here pretty quick, a voice from behind said. Minato's eyes widened for a moment, and he turned to face Kane, who was sitting comfortably on a bench with a bottle of sake. He had an amused look on his face as he took a swig. I was just about to sit down and have a drink until you got here. By the way, how did you find me so easily? Kane asked, lowering the bottle from his lips. Minato's eyes narrowed as he put his kunao back into his pouch, all the while looking at Kane. It wasn't hard. Your chakra is similar to your sister's, though with some slight differences. And I knew you would choose an isolated area for our rematch, so this was the best choice. Kane smirked at that, then got up and sealed the sake bottle into a scroll he tucked under his cloak. Kushin and Ichin married a smart man, indeed, Kane said with a small smile before frowning slightly. I'll have to apologize to her after this is over. Funny, Minato said, taking off his cloak to reveal his Konoha Jonin's outfit. Strapped to the back of his flak jacket were 3 scrolls and a dual ninjato. He then glared at Kane. I was thinking the same thing. The Battle of Konoha had begun. With Minato and Kane. The two stared at each other for what seemed like forever, neither moving, with only Kane's cloak flowing in the breeze. Finally, Minato made the first move, disappearing in a flash and startling Kane for a second. Kane spun around and raised his left arm to block a kunao strike from the 4th Hokage. When the kunao hit Kane's body, it didn't pierce or slash as it was supposed to, it was simply held in place. Minato's eyes widened, but he had no time to wonder as Kane delivered a powerful kick to his stomach, sending the young Hokage flying backward into some rubble. Kane took a second to look at his arm and saw only a hole in his sleeve, no injury. Good, it seems he doesn't know about Shintai like I thought. It looks like Kushina is still keeping the clan's secrets a secret, Kane thought, digging through his cloak. Guess that means I don't have to worry about him knowing Shinken either. You didn't see that coming, did you? Kane smirked as Minato stood up. I can't tell if it's the fact that my weapon didn't pierce me, or that I knew where you would come from. Still, he pulled a small crest from his cloak. It glowed, revealing a massive, double-sided gray broadsword with the Uzumaki symbol. I can't really give you time to figure it out. He vanished, reappearing behind Minato, swinging his sword down. The contact caused a massive explosion, taking out nearby buildings. Kane looked at the spot where Minato's body was supposed to be. Before the smoke could clear, Kane said, you know, you've got to find different spots to attack besides the back. He lifted his sword behind him, blocking Minato's Raiznan. The 4th Hokage was once again shocked. His sword blocked my Raiznan? How, he thought, jumping back to gain distance. Your sword skills haven't changed, Kane-san. Kane smirked. Don't call me that, Minato. We're not family. If we were, I'd be less comfortable killing you. Minato pulled out his dual ninjato, getting into a pose. What about Kushina-chan and Mito-chan? Aren't they family, too? Kane frowned, raising his broadsword with one hand, briefly releasing a fraction of killing intent. Of course they are, even though I never met the latter. However, if they side with Konoha, we will honor that and treat them as enemies. A sinister smile appeared on his face. But the person going after them, he's not the forgiving type. Before Minato could question what he meant, Kane gripped his sword with both hands. The broadsword began to glow white as Kane said, "Onmatan, divine blade slash." He swung his blade, releasing a large, fast, white slash of chakra towards Minato. "Shit!" the fourth yelled, raising his swords, infusing them with chakra. He did so just as the attack made contact, causing another large explosion and shockwave, sending nearby objects flying backward. Up on the Hokage monument. "I'm glad I found you, sire," Shingen said, walking towards the edge of the Hokage monument, the massive mountain overlooking Konoha. Carved onto it were the faces of the 4 Hokages. Sitting on top of the head of Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage and founder, was the Tachiagari leader, or emperor. The man was looking down at the village as fighting ensued within it. Without looking at the young man, the emperor said, "I was wondering whether you'd be looking for me or joining the assault. Did you at least kill any of Konoha's people?" "I had a brief skirmish with some members of the Uchiha clan," Shingen replied, standing next to his leader. "Eventually, their corpses or wounded forms will be discovered." "Eventually?" the leader asked. "You sound as if there would be survivors. Kane-sen told me never to expect things to go 100% as planned," Shingen replied, earning a noticeable smirk from the emperor. "I was surprised to sense your chakra up here. I would have thought you'd be down in the village, viewing the results directly. I find it more suitable for me to be up here," the leader responded. He formed a cold smirk. "In fact, I find it to be ironic." Shingen raised an eyebrow. "Ironic, sire?" "The reason for the Hokages of the past and present to have their faces carved onto this mountain is a way of remembering them and their accomplishments in service to the village." He paused. "But there is another reason, to show that even in death, they still overlook the village, guiding and protecting it." His eyes darkened, and his cold smirk grew. "And now all they can do is watch helplessly as their beloved village and people are led to ruin, with I, the instigator of that ruin, sitting with them, seeing what they see. To me, that is the irony, and it is pleasurable." He finished, going back into silence and watching the battle below. Shingen didn't respond, merely joining his leader in watching the carnage. After a few minutes of silence, Shingen spoke. "I took the liberty of sending 4 Kurikishi to kill Hiruzen Sarutobi." "Did you now?" the leader asked. "And who would those be?" "I sent Hagashi, Chijimu, Shiko, and Tanashi. I have confidence they can deal with the retired Hokage, so you don't have to dirty your hands with dealing with Hiruzen," Shingen replied. The leader smirked a little at the thought of concern and turned his attention back to the village below. Suddenly, the leader's eyes perked up before narrowing, which Shingen noticed. "Sire? It seems Naruto-kun has found his prey," was the leader's only reply. "With Kushina and Mito." Thanks to Kushina's trained instincts, she shouted to her daughter, "Move." The two got out of the way just as the spot they were in exploded. Kushina landed on a destroyed pillar while Mito landed on a house's roof. "Who's there?" Kushina shouted, pulling a red-bladed katana out of nowhere. Her response was a man standing on a roof across from her and Mito. The man wore the same outfit as the other invaders. However, a pitch-black mask with only his red spiky hair showing covered his face. The man was a few inches taller than both women, about the same height as Minato. "Are you one of the invaders?" Mito asked, pulling her dual katanas from seals on her wrists. The masked man did not reply, merely raising his right hand, revealing a bracelet with the Uzumaki symbol. In a brief flash, it disappeared, replaced with a katana. The blade was long and completely black with a red and black grip and a black round guard. Before either female could get a better look, the masked man swung his katana. A bolt of lightning, as well as fire and wind, launched from the sword towards Kushina and Mito. They were momentarily shocked by the unexpected attack but managed to jump out of the way. The attack struck the area where they once stood, causing a giant explosion that could probably be seen by half the village. Realizing that the time for talk was over, Kushina charged towards the masked invader at inhuman speed. When she was close enough, she brought her blade down, but the masked man calmly brought his sword up to block her attack. While he was focused on Kushina, Mito used the opportunity to get behind him, aiming for his legs. However, the plan didn't work as hoped. The masked man used his left arm to smack Mito's blade aside with ease. "What?" Mito thought to herself as she and Kushina jumped back, gaining distance. She noticed the man's arm wasn't wounded from contact with her blade. What is his body made out of? Iron? Kushina, however, had separate thoughts. That was Shintai. So they are Uzumaki, as I thought, she thought. I guess I'll have to resort to using mine, though it's been a while. I just hope I haven't lost it completely. Kushina Uzumaki, a voice said, snapping her out of her thoughts. She saw the masked man looking at her with his blade raised. The weapon looked like a cross between a katana and a longsword with a single-edged red blade and black markings. The crossguard was shaped as a pentacle, and the handle was two-handed with black and red stripes. At the bottom was a long red chain that seemed to wrap around the owner's arm. For the crimes against the clan and your family, the head of the Uzumaki clan has ordered that you be judged. As such, I shall take upon the duty of exacting your punishment, and finally have revenge for those years of neglect you and Minato Namikaze have done, Naruto thought to himself as he charged towards his mother, sword raised. With Sai. Sai jumped back, quickly drawing several ink birds within his scroll. A few seconds later, the birds flew out towards Sai's opponent, who had a passive look on his face. The masked Kurokishi merely raised his right hand and pointed forward, his thorns flying towards the ink birds. When they came into contact, the thorns destroyed the ink birds but were pushed back by the more numerous projectiles Sai created. Once his thorns returned, NASA saw that Sai wasn't in his original position anymore. He then felt a presence above him, looking up to see Sai in midair, finishing another drawing, which turned out to be a lion. Unable to use his thorns fast enough, NASA took the attack head-on. The ink lion slammed into NASA, causing dust to spread and cover the area. Sai landed, surveying the area to see if NASA would appear, as he doubted an attack like that would kill him. To his surprise, NASA merely walked out of the dust cloud, completely uninjured except for some dirt on his clothing. Impossible. Sai thought as NASA's thorns reappeared. Even if it wasn't strong enough to kill him, it should have at least left some wounds. But he looks completely unharmed. Perhaps I should try and attack him faster. But before Sai could do anything else, he noticed a shadow overhead. Looking up, he saw a large form heading straight towards them. Thanks to his quick reflexes and survival instincts, Sai managed to jump out of the way before the newcomer was buried within the crater. As he landed, Sai got a glimpse of him. As he figured, the man had a large, muscular figure and wore a uniform similar to the other invaders. The only difference was that he wore a black wrestling mask with a red swirl on the front and matching thick red markings around the eyes, nose, and cheeks. His mouth and chin, along with a red mustache, were the only things not covered by the mask, which also showed his tan skin. He wore ninja sandals that were shorter and black gloves and a wrestler's belt around his waist. Sai had little time to take in the situation when the newcomer charged towards him, his left hand reaching out to grab the ink user. In a fast thought-out plan, Sai pulled out his flat-tipped tanto to defend himself until a wall of earth rose up between him and his opponent. When the man rammed his hand into the wall, it stopped him, but not before he was able to nearly break through it. "What the?" the man asked in shock, just noticing the wall of earth. Sai was in a similar state of confusion but was cut off when something ran past him. The next thing he knew, a familiar pink-haired girl rammed her own fist into the wall, smashing it and revealing the enemy. The enemy, shocked, was unprepared when Sakura rammed another fist into his face, sending him flying back a couple of feet. "Sakura, what are you doing here?" Sai said as he got up once the large enemy was buried under rubble. The medic nin turned to face her teammate and smiled. "Sorry, Sai, but right now it's not a good idea to take these guys on alone." "She's right, Sai," a familiar though unusually serious voice said behind the two. Sai turned to see Kakashi Hatake walking up to them with his hands out of his pockets. His posture was also very rigid and stiff, a sign he wasn't in a lax mood. "Kakashi-sensei," Sai said as the silver-haired man walked past him. The sound of feet running caused Sai to look to see that the massive Iryu was back up and charging towards the three Konoha ninja. "Damn it! Don't think I'll let you get away with that, you bitch," Yamu yelled towards Sakura. "I wouldn't run so recklessly if I were you," Kakashi said casually to Yamu. Before the Uzumaki could understand what he meant, he was suddenly engulfed in a giant explosion from beneath him. What the hell?" Yamu cried before a giant crater stood where he once was. "I had placed dozens of explosive tags underneath that spot, knowing you would run over them," Kakashi said to himself and the others before looking at NASA. "If that explosion didn't finish you off, you'll be trapped down in that pit long enough for us to finish your friend off." Sai and Sakura merely looked at their sensei, never seeing Kakashi so serious before. "Don't take your eyes off the enemy, Sai, Sakura," Kakashi said as he stared at NASA, who had a passive look on his face, even if he just witnessed one of his comrades get defeated. "These people invaded our village and began slaughtering shinobi and civilians without remorse. We're showing no mercy to these monsters." As Kakashi said this, all over the village, many of the Kurokishi were being confronted by well-known and strong Konoha shinobi, including Asuma Sarutobi, Minato Namikaze, Kushina and Mito, and Sumiyazuka and her kids, who were facing Gorogoro, Kane, Naruto, though the two girls were unaware, and Yuka, respectively. Near the western part of the village, Tenten and her Umbu team were facing an invader who wore the standard Kurokishi cloak with his smooth red hair tied into a ponytail that reached his shoulders. He also had thin eyebrows, tan skin, and bags under his eyes. Underneath his Kurokishi cloak, he wore a black sleeveless coat that reached down to his waist and was held together by a red sash with a black swirl. He also wore matching shinobi pants and black sandals. "We're not going to forgive you people for what you've done to our village," Tenten said, pulling out two katanas, followed by the rest of her team, who pulled out their ninjatos. At the industrial section of the village, Shibuya Barame, his son Shino, and several of their clansmen intercepted a young man with long, red spiky hair that went halfway down his back. He had tan skin, red eyes, and fanged teeth. Underneath his cloak, he wore black pants with red bands around his ankles and wrists. He also wore blue sandals and a black striped t-shirt that reached down to his waist. Over the shirt were two straps, one going over the other like an X, with shoulder pads attached. On his left shoulder pad was a kanji tattoo for Whirlpool. "Show no mercy, Shino," Shivi instructed his son. Shino nodded. "I never intended to. They've done something inexcusable that cannot be forgiven, so why would I?" A young man in his early 20s was approaching the hospital. He wore the kurikishi cloak over his shoulders. Underneath was a black jacket with red stripes, which had a flipped-up, fur-trimmed collar, over a black shirt with a belt. It matched his black pants and knee-length sandals. His skin was tan and he also wore designer glasses. Standing between him and the hospital were Tsunade Senju and her assistant Shizun. "Don't think I'll let you get by so easily," Tsunade said as she cracked her knuckles. "And don't think I'll forgive you for all the deaths you've caused here." Having arrived near where three of Konoha's famous clans linked, and Uzumaki was intercepted by the clan head Shikaka Nara, Choza Akimichi, and Inoichi Yamanaka. His entire body was covered by his kurikishi cloak and a black mask with red trims that covered his face and head, including the back. The mask had 4 slits, 2 on each side separated by a peak in the center. The collar was also high, covering the man's neck. "You have some nerve to come here, let alone attack our village so violently," Inoichi said, glaring at the man. "Don't expect any mercy from us, bastard," Choza shouted as he pulled out his bow staff and slammed it on the ground hard. "It's troublesome, but I'm in a really bad mood, so I couldn't care less about that," Shikako finally said with a rare angry look in his eyes. At Training Ground 9, Lee and Guy were facing a very large adversary. The man was about twice the size of a normal man, with a bulky figure. He had bushy red hair and a beard that connected to the bangs of his hair, making it look like a chinstrap beard. His trench coat was black with red stripes and reached his calf while his black cloak went down to his ankles. His pants were baggy and had red skulls painted on the knees while he wore ankle-high sandals. A chain-like belt was around his coat. "Yosh! Lee, let's show these invaders Konoha's flames of youth," Guy shouted with much enthusiasm. "Yes, Guy-sensei, my flames are boiling with youthful power," Lee said with equal energy. Their opponent merely sweat-dropped, wondering why he was stuck with the nut jobs. Kakashi's group. Kakashi and NASA were currently in a staring contest with one another while Sakura and Sai stood side by side with their teacher. "Sai, do you know what this man's abilities are?" Kakashi asked. "Only what I've seen," Sai replied. "So far his only means of offense are those 10 floating thorns, and I think that's the limit of how many he can make," Sai said, glancing at the thorns. "He can manipulate them at will, making close combat impossible. I think they might have some kind of poisoning, because when I got here, one of the others said that whoever got pierced died instantly while screaming." "Screaming?" Sakura asked, shocked and somewhat stricken, unable to believe anyone should die like that. "I've never heard of a poison that could do that. Along with it he has good reflexes and some kind of defense that makes him impervious to nearly all of my attacks, even against explosive tags," Sai finished. "That's all I really found out until you and Sakura-san arrived, sensei." "I see," Kakashi said as he stepped forward. "That's enough for me to think of a plan to use. Sakura, since you're the medic here as well as more of a close combat fighter, I want you to hang in the rear for support." Sakura nodded. "Sai, you use your ink drawings to distract him and make him focus his thorns on those." Sai nodded. "I'll try and get in close and go for the kill. We won't know how strong his defense is, but I bet it won't be able to withstand a piercing attack." "Wouldn't it be safer to trap him in a genjutsu with your Sharingan, sensei?" Sakura asked, knowing that with a genjutsu, the enemy would be immobilized long enough for them to bring in the kill. "Normally I would try that," Kakashi said, "but in this case, it won't work for 2 reasons. This surprised Sakura and Sai. There were 2 reasons why using a Sharingan genjutsu won't work. The first reason is that if he is an Uzumaki like the report said, then just as with Kushina-san, genjutsu won't fully work on him because he can just dispel it with a seal or overpower it with his large chakra," Kakashi said as he began to form hand signs. "The second reason is because the Sharingan is a Kekii Genkai." This caused confused looks on his students' faces. Tenzo, the Umbu that was killed a few days ago when these people declared war on us, mentioned something about his Mokutan before dying. We didn't have an idea of what he meant at first, but seeing who the enemy is, now we know why. Realization dawned on Sakura and Sai, both of their eyes widening. "The Uzumaki clan specialized in Fuinjutsu," Sakura said. "That means they must have sealed the Umbu's Mokutan somehow, similar to with chakra suppression tags." "Exactly," Kakashi said. "Though while in some cases this could be a problem, since there are more skilled shinobi who don't have a Kekii Genkai, it isn't that serious. Nara, Akimichi, and Yamanaka clan heads. In our case, that doesn't hinder us at all," Shikaka Nara said, his genius mind already deciphering the same conclusion that Kakashi came up with. "All of our techniques are hidden, which means that we weren't born with them like those with Kekii Genkai were." That means we can go all out without worry, Choza concluded as he readied his bow staff. Inoichi glared at their opponent, Kizoku. This information has already been sent out to the rest of our forces. You people made a mistake thinking you could invade so easily. Shibi's group. However, believing that gives us the advantage over you would be illogical, Shibi Abarame said to Ihoshiki. Because of the high chakra you and your allies are letting off, we won't be holding back, Shino added as his insects began to stir. But his father stopped him before he could act. Father? It would also be illogical to attack him head on all at once, Shibi continued. We still do not know the extent of his abilities to attack him straightforward. I will go in first and determine his moves for the rest of you to see, Shibi said as his insects began pouring out. Training Ground 9. So I'll attack this unyouthful person first, and you follow my lead once I've roughened him up a bit and discovered his strengths, Guy said as he stepped forward, a serious expression on his face. But Guy-sensei, if we both attack together with our flames of youth at their maximum, then we'll be able to overpower him, Lee exclaimed. In most cases we would do that, my youthful student, Guy said as he got into a familiar pose. However, there is too much at risk to do that when going in one at a time. To analyze his movements would be better. Hyuga Compound. Even though our Juken requires our Kekii Genkai to be activated, Hinata said as she, Niji, Hayashi and several other Hyuga members stared down at the Kurikishi before them. That doesn't mean we can't fight to protect our home, she finished. The opponent was a young man with narrow eyes and short red hair with pointed bangs hanging between his eyes. He had scars of equal size on both sides of his lips. He wore the regular Kurikishi uniform, all black with a cloak, thigh-length trench coat with a long black sash, black pants, and knee-length black sandals, with the only thing standing out being black fingerless gloves. Hinata-sama, I think it would be better for you to head towards the emergency shelter with the others, Niji voiced his opinion to his cousin. The clan cannot afford to lose its clan head. Without taking her eyes off the enemy, Hinata replied with fierce determination. It is because I am the clan head that I won't run and hide while our home is being attacked. If you have a problem with that, Niji Nii-san, then you may say so after the fight. Niji and, secretly, Hayashi stared at Hinata before turning to face their opponent. However, Hayashi had a small smile on his face, proud of how his daughter had grown. Sum's group. Back with Sum and her group, facing off against Madoka, the Inyazuka matriarch gave a look to her Ninken companion Kuromaru. As if reading the other's thoughts, Kuromaru gave a nod, prompting Sum to begin forming hand signs. Kiba, Hana, I want you two and the rest to watch my back while Kuromaru and I go in. Yes, mother, Hana said. I still think this is a bad idea, Kiba complained with Akamara barking in agreement. We don't know what she's fully capable of, Kiba. Sum barked. I'm the best choice to go in first to find out, giving us a better idea of how to beat her. The Inyazuka matriarch turned back to face Madoka, who just had a bored look on her face, as if there was something more interesting to do. Acting quickly, Sum formed the hand signs of the clan's signature technique. Man-beast transformation, double-headed wolf. And then both her and her Ninken were consumed in smoke, only to reappear into a giant two-headed dog with black fur. Training Ground 9. Guy crossed his arms before his face and got into a crouching position. Soon chakra began to leak out of his body, and his skin began to turn red. Lee noticed this and commented, he's skipping the first two and going up to the third gate. Siamun. Gate of Life Kai. Guy shouted and soon the chakra began to explode from Guy's body, causing the ground underneath him to crack and give way to the released chakra. Shikaku's group. Inoichi. Choza. We're going straight with the Inoshikacho. I'll start us off so you can take control of his mind, Inoichi. Shikaka said as he began forming the hand signs. Right. Inoichi said while Choza got into position. Moving quickly before the Kurikishi could escape, Shikaka murmured, shadow imitation jutsu, and then his shadow began to extend and head straight towards its intended target. Shibi's group. Several of Shibi's Kikaichu began to pour out of the man's body. However, instead of charging from Shibi's body, thousands of insects appeared from below where the Kurikishi was standing. I've already had several of my insects and more bury underneath you the moment we spotted you, Shibi said as the insects began to form a tornado around the Iryu. Why, you ask? Because I believed you would have a technique to keep them from you or destroy my Kikaichu before they reached you. Secret technique, insect tornado. Kakashi's team. Move now. Kakashi shouted to his students as he held his right wrist with his left hand. Right. Sai and Sakura replied and got into position. NASA watched those two prepare their own things but moved his sight back onto Kakashi. His left hand began to light up with electricity until it looked like a blade of lightning. Rakuri. Kakashi said as the lightning chakra stabilized in his hand. Now with all 5 Kurikishi that were facing these opponents, NASA, Madoka, Kazoku, Senzoku, and Ihoshiki, most of them kept calm looks on their faces while some had smiles instead. As if in sync, the 5 took a palm-sized medallion out of their pockets. The medallions had a red swirl on it, with it ending at the very center of the medallion. As one they all said the same word, activate. Soon the medallions began to open, starting from the center with the swirl slowly closing in on it, revealing a pitch-black hole in its place. Before anyone could react, a massive invisible force came out of the medallion towards those that activated a technique, stunning them upon contact. However, that feeling soon left as the targets soon returned to their normal forms, with Guy going back to his normal skin color, Sam and Kuromaru reverting back to their forms, Shibi's insects dispersing, Shikaku's shadow returning to its regular shape, and Kakashi's Rakuri disappearing. Then just as it had opened, the medallions soon all closed with a low clink, with their victims all gaping at what just happened. I am possible, Kakashi murmured as he tried forming the hand signs again and got into his usual pose when activating the Chidori or Rakuri. His visible eye widened in horror when he saw nothing happening. Doing a quick check, he molded his chakra momentarily to feel it. He was surprised and relieved that he could still access his chakra. I can still use my chakra. So what happened to my technique? Kakashi thought to himself as he looked at NASA. Said man had a surprisingly sinister, smug look on his face as he held up his medallion, that was emitting some lightning from it. That brief moment made Kakashi realize what had just happened, but all that did was leave a horrified expression on his face. And for the first time, Kakashi began to show a bit of fear as well, something that Sakura and Sai took notice of. Kakashi-sensei, are you okay? What happened? Sakura asked, worried for her sensei. Shakily while looking at his hands, Kakashi replied, He sealed my techniques. I can't use any of my ninjutsu, the famous copycat shinobi, who was said to have copied over 1,000 techniques, exclaimed. On top of the Hokage monument, the Tachiegari leader and Shingen looked down at the village below, noticing the shouts of shock and horror. The Tachiegari leader merely smirked in amusement at the sound. I guess Konoha discovered the power of the medallions, the leader said. Now the nightmare has begun, and then went back into comfortable silence. Kane smirked as his brother-in-law charged. Raising his broadsword, Kane made it seem like he'd strike Minato. Instead, he brought the sword down to his right, blocking a surprise strike from Minato and shocking the Hokage. Minato couldn't believe that Kane had somehow predicted his feigned charge and sideways shift. Again? He predicted my move again? What kind of ability is this? Looks like you can't figure it out, Kane said, kicking Minato hard in the chest. The blow sent the fourth Hokage skidding back several feet, though he somehow maintained his grip on his two swords. But I'm not the kind of guy who reveals his secrets, even if it's an easy fight. Bastard, Minato cursed under his breath. Kane then pointed his broadsword at Minato. Before the Hokage could react, a white energy substance swirled around the tip, forming a spear that Kane fired directly at him. To Kane's shock, Minato vanished in an instant, and Kane had no idea where he'd gone. Where did he? A kick to the back of his head cut him off, sending him flying backward. Kane recovered just as Minato reappeared, delivering an X-slash to his chest with both swords. The strike tore his uniform and sent blood flying. Minato didn't stop. He moved faster, leaving multiple slashes on Kane's arms, legs, back, cheek, and shoulders. Though his clan's healing ability was closing the wounds and his shintai prevented fatal blows, Kane couldn't keep up. I'm not 100% sure how he was able to anticipate my attacks before, Minato thought, landing another blow on Kane's back. But so far, it looked like Kane was able to foresee my attacks similar to how the Sharingan can see one's chakra and movements. But if I go fast enough, Kane can't keep up. With that in mind, Minato formed a Raise-Nan in his hand, intending to deliver the final blow. He aimed for Kane's chest, where the deepest wound was, knowing the Raise-Nan would be fatal. Sorry, Kushina, Minato thought as he moved to strike. But I have to do this to protect Konoha. Just inches from the chest, Kane's hand shot out, grabbing Minato's wrist. Minato's eyes widened in shock as Kane stopped him, then delivered a powerful kick to the Hokage's chin, sending him flying and crashing into the ground, creating a small crater. Humph, about time, Kane muttered, getting up as his broadsword reappeared in his right hand. Minato slowly rose, his body aching, and looked up at the standing Kane, whose wounds were already healing. Took me a while, but I finally got used to your speed. Minato's eyes widened. Got used to it? What do you mean? I adapted to your fighting style, Kane said, resting his sword on his shoulder. My ability is adaptation. I adapt to my surroundings, my enemy's fighting style, skills, techniques, and even poison by creating antibodies. Minato was absolutely shocked. How is that even possible? He whispered. Of course, it's not perfect, and using it is a risk to myself, too, Kane said casually with a smirk. I have to experience something firsthand before I can adjust to it. Meaning if I want to be immune to a poison, I have to be injected with it. And the damn ability doesn't kick in right away, so I don't rely on it too much. Suddenly, Kane grabbed Minato's left leg. He saw a set of seals on the sandal before throwing him against a wall, causing Minato to cough up blood. As I thought, you put an altered version of the high-ration seal formula on your sandals, Kane said, recalling what he'd seen. Unlike the actual high-ration, which teleports you, the one on your sandals allows you to quicken your speed. 1 step counts as 10, 2 as 20. I can see why you were labeled one of the 5S level threats. Cain then rammed his sword into the ground to stand it on its own. He made hand seals and murmured, "Sacred warrior dance." Hundreds of glowing blue blades suddenly appeared, floating in the air, forming a cylinder wall around them. Minato was shocked and barely registered Cain's next words impale him before an explosion followed. At Konoha's hospital, Tsunade slammed her fist into the ground where Gujen had just been. He had jumped out of the way, then lunged his right arm forward. It began to glow and transformed into a long black arm with 4 blades forming a large one. "Give it up, traitor. My ability allows me to change the form and shapes of my arms to whatever I desire. I can prepare for any opponent, even you," Gujen yelled, preparing to skewer the slug Sunin. Tsunade dodged, then landed another powerful punch, this time moving too fast for him to avoid. In a desperate attempt to lessen the blow, Gujen used Shintai and a shield he created from his left arm. It worked, but he was still sent back several feet by the strike, which left a large dent in the shield. "Damn it!" Gujen cursed as his shield reverted to his hand, revealing a severe wound. His arm was bleeding, and his sleeve was ripped. "You treacherous bitch, I'll kill you slowly for this." Tsunade raised an eyebrow. "Traitor? Why do you keep calling me that? I never did anything to you guys. Not to Tachie Gary, but to the clan," Gujen exclaimed, surprising Tsunade and Shizun, who was standing by for support. "To the clan? You mean the Uzumaki clan? What have I done to them?" Gujen scoffed as if she were playing dumb. "Don't pretend to be ignorant, granddaughter of the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, grandniece of the second Hokage, and Senju Princess of Konoha." Gujen listed her many titles. "You take pride in the Senju name and their techniques, yet you show no gratitude for your Uzumaki heritage. Did Mito-sama mean anything to you? Or was she just a weak grandmother on the sidelines?" Tsunade froze. It was true, people had always referred to her as Hashirama Senju's granddaughter and Tobirama Senju's grandniece, both powerful members of the great Senju clan. She had never once been recognized for her ties to the Uzumaki clan or to Mito Uzumaki, the woman who inspired her to master medical jutsu and the yin seal release on her forehead. And while she was proud of her Senju heritage, she had never shown the same admiration for the Uzumaki clan. "Tsunade-sama, look out!" Shizun cried, snapping her out of her thoughts. Tsunade looked up to see Gujen directly above her, both arms transformed into large black fists, ready to crush her. "Die, traitor," he cried, slamming his left fist down. What should have been a quick victory changed when Tsunade effortlessly stopped the giant fist with her hand, shocking both Gujen and Shizun. She had a vice grip on his hand and wasn't letting go. "It's true, I've always been praised for my connection to the Senju clan and my grandfather, and that I've always credited most of my achievements and techniques to his clan, but," she said, squeezing his hand so hard it shattered and reverted to a normal arm, now bleeding profusely since Gujen hadn't powered it with Shintai. Still in shock, he let Tsunade grab his other arm and pull him down. "But that doesn't mean I have no pride in being an Uzumaki. Neither does it mean I don't love my grandmother or am thankful for what she gave me," Tsunade roared, slamming her right fist straight into Gujen's chest. "I won't let you bastards sully her and her clan's name by invading our village." Gujen let out a silent scream as bones, lungs, ribs, and his stomach were crushed by the impact. The force was too great, his vision went dark, and blood flew from his mouth. His body was sent flying through several buildings before he finally stopped at the 7th one, dead. Shizun stared at the power of the punch, having never seen her master deliver one like it. That was incredible, Tsunade-sama. That was the most powerful punch I've ever seen." Tsunade, however, ignored her student's praise. She was thinking the same thing as she looked at her fist. "I've delivered many strong punches before, but this one felt different. It felt a lot looser, not as concentrated as it usually does when focusing chakra. But not in a bad way, more natural and less restrained." "What the hell was that?" "Shizun!" Tsunade shouted. When she heard a "ha" from her student, she continued, "I'm going to call for a barrier team to set up a protective barrier around the hospital. If things get worse, I'm heading out to the battlefield." With Jiraiya near the western border of the village, the Toad Sage was running across rooftops, keeping an eye out for enemies. So far, he'd had several confrontations that usually ended with him saving other Konoha ninja while the enemy either ran or moved on. "They've focused on the others but ignored me. Why? They should know I'm one of the biggest threats here, so why would they ignore me?" Jiraiya thought as he jumped to another roof. When he landed, he noticed he wasn't alone. Another invader, wearing the black Kurikishi cloak, stood before him. He had a black cowboy hat with a red Uzumaki symbol, wild red shoulder-length hair tucked behind his ears, and tan skin with red fuzz on his chin. Beneath his cloak was a black jacket over a white shirt, black gloves, and a black and gold belt with a metal wolf skull buckle, holding up black pants with dark gray fur on the lower legs and black sandals. Jiraiya smirked, getting into a fighting stance. So someone finally steps up to the plate, eh? He asked sarcastically. The man didn't reply, simply vanishing before Jiraiya's eyes. The toad sage barely had time to react when the Iria pulled an ornate pistol from his cloak, pointed it at Jiraiya's face, and fired a chakra beam. Jiraiya dodged easily, flipping sideways to the ground below. But the man was on him again, this time with 2 pistols. He fired another chakra bolt, which Jiraiya dodged before delivering a powerful punch to the back of the Kurikishi's head. The man showed no sign of pain, his hat remaining in place. As the Kurikishi hit the ground and Jiraiya prepared a raise-non finisher, the man spun around, firing 2 chakra bolts from both pistols and revealing his dull gray eyes. Jiraiya dodged one, but the other pierced his right shoulder, causing a decent amount of blood to fly out. Jiraiya winced, clutching the hole in his shoulder as he backed away from his opponent, who stared at him blankly. Damn, I knew they'd send a tough one after me, but I didn't think you'd be that tough, Jiraiya mumbled as his enemy raised his pistols and fired again, this time releasing multiple mini fireballs. With the speed of a cage-level shinobi, Jiraiya formed hand seals. Doton, Mud Wall Jutsu. A giant wall of earth appeared between him and the projectiles. The fireballs exploded against the wall, forcing Jiraiya back a block. But his opponent wouldn't let him rest. As soon as Jiraiya landed safely, the Iria was on him instantly. However, Jiraiya formed a raise-non, repelled a chakra bullet, and jumped over the Uzumaki. Once he was above him, Jiraiya made more hand seals. Katon, Flame Bullet Jutsu. He exhaled a large fireball toward the Kurikishi. The gap was so small the Uzumaki had little time to dodge. But unknown to Jiraiya, the Kurikishi muttered, Nova Bullet, and fired a large orange-red chakra beam from one of his pistols. The 2 attacks collided and exploded, sending Jiraiya flying backward and crashing into a nearby building. Shit, this is going to be harder than I thought, Jiraiya muttered, getting back on his feet. Kushina hurled a kunao, her special explosive tag affixed, toward the masked Naruto. Realizing deflection was useless, Naruto leapt backward from the explosion, only to feel his back crash into a stone wall. Naruto deduced Mito had created it. The file noted Mito commanded water, wind, and earth release jutsu. However, Naruto anticipated this, along with Kushina's unique explosive device. Dissimilar to standard tags which produced just one detonation, these possessed multiple thin layers of tags stacked together. Consequently, as the initial one detonated, its blast would ignite the next one sequentially. This quality made them lethal because the explosion's reach was broader, bigger, and stronger than what individuals were typically accustomed to facing. Kushina and Mito observed while the enormous blast engulfed their masked adversary. Yet, once the smoke dissipated, it showed he remained alive, bearing only minor wounds, some singe marks on his garments, and a fracture upon his mask. I am amazed he survived your special explosive tag, Mom. Mito muttered, astonished. She understood the potency of those tags. Exceedingly few could endure that kind of detonation, and any survivors were usually severely scorched or at least lost limbs. Kushina offered no response, for as the haze completely cleared she was attacked with a forceful descending sword blow from the masked Naruto's blade. She barely succeeded in lifting her blade to parry the approaching attack, yet the clash of their steel generated a minor shockwave, blasting Mito backward several feet and creating fissures in the earth beneath Kushina's feet. He's channeling Shintai to augment his Raijin's power. Kushina mused internally, then successfully swapped places with a close-by stone, which Naruto cleaved in half. Kushina succeeded in rejoining Mito, who now brandished 2 katanas. The elder Uzumaki was pondering her subsequent action when she abruptly sensed the vanishing of a significant, familiar chakra signature. Mito also sensed it, gazing worriedly at her mother. That was Dad's chakra, she mumbled. Mom, you don't think, she asked her stunned, worried mother as she felt her husband's chakra dissipate. Naruto also sensed the chakra signature slowly disappear and internally mused, it seems Uncle Kane has handled Namikaze. Up on top of the Hokage monument, Shingen, positioned beside his leader, glanced skyward briefly, detecting something. It seems Kane-san has bested Minato Namikaze. Indeed, the leader concurred, still staring upon the village of Konoha where screams of the perishing in combat persisted all day amid smoke and flames ascending heavenward. I confess, I expected they would have offered greater opposition, but that is the result when a village succumbs to hubris and decay. Should we commence the last stage, sire? Shingen questioned his leader. The leader was on the verge of responding when a huge detonation erupted from the village's western flank. Shingen glanced toward the blast's origin and remarked, 4 Kurikishi chakra signatures just vanished, he proclaimed, shocked. Who could do that? The leader instead grinned maliciously while he rose. It appears someone is quite upset with me. He then pivoted gradually and beheld no one but Hiruzen Sarutobi, dressed in ninja attire with a gory face, rendering his fierce stare even more menacing. Is that not so, Hiruzen Sarutobi? You are absolutely right, J-Kuna Uzumaki. The Sandaime Hokage responded, dropping the body of a Kurikishi from his grasp. When the corpse thudded to the earth, Hiruzen went on. I have chosen to start to atone for my numerous past errors by starting with you, J-kuna. I will annihilate you. With Suzuki Uchiha. With the area around them already devastated from their fight's destructive force, Suzuki Uchiha and Beizo Uzumaki continued their struggle, each looking to claim an advantage against the other. Katon, Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu. Suzuki whispered, then discharged a volley of small fireballs at Beizo. However, the Uzumaki just waved his left arm, and for a short moment, a reflective gale appeared. When the fireballs met Beizo, they instead flew past him, striking the close terrain. After that was finished, Beizo lifted his left hand at Suzuki. Abruptly, a big sphere of azure lightning materialized in his palm before being shot rapidly toward the younger Uchiha. Suzuki reacted swiftly, managing to employ Susanoo's ribcage to deflect the assault. Damn it, Beizo swore internally. I should have slain him ere he could summon Susanoo. Its attacking capability is impressive, but I can simply use my barrier seal to negate the harm. The defense at his presence a challenge. I cannot seem to score any direct strikes, and sealing it is impossible because of his shifting chakra. I require a strategy to turn his own power against him. I've got it. Beizo realized just before a shadow fell over him. Glancing upward, the Uzumaki noticed that Suzuki, enveloped in Susanoo's ribcage with one arm now formed holding a sword, was descending upon him. Yet, Beizo succeeded in leaping aside, dodging the probably lethal blow. Damn, this fellow is complicating matters, Suzuki reflected as he dispelled Susanoo, saving chakra. Slaying him would be the simplest course of action, but gambling on forfeiting potential valuable intelligence on Tachiagari is something I want to evade. He hesitated, reactivating Susanoo, creating a hand to seize Beizo, but the man dodged aside once more. If I maintain Susanoo intermittently, I can parry his assaults while devising how to disable him. Beizo, however, planned something else. From a safe distance, he ran his left hand, glowing with chakra, along his saber, thus imbuing the weapon with chakra. Before Suzuki could discern his actions, Beizo thrust his sword forward, shooting what appeared to be a transparent sphere that was gradually expanding. Witnessing this, Suzuki instantly manifested his complete Susanoo to repel the assault, but to his astonishment, the attack didn't hit Susanoo directly but enveloped both Suzuki and his Susanoo, trapping the young Uchiha inside a massive transparent dome. Beizo grinned at the sight. Summoning your Susanoo was a reckless error, Suzuki Uchiha. By doing so, you've simply accelerated your own demise, the Uzumaki declared. Disregarding the man's taunt, Suzuki attempted to escape the chakra sphere with Susanoo, expecting the giant's strength would disperse it. To his shock, however, the sphere remained intact. Instead, his Susanoo began to fracture while the dome started compressing around him. This made Suzuki flinch from the pain as his personal defense became his aggressor. What is this? Suzuki wondered, struggling to regain his composure. Outside, Beizo cackled wildly as he saw the dome started contracting around Suzuki. Did you really think raw power could shatter that sphere? He shouted derisively. He watched as Susanoo simultaneously began to disintegrate while contracting, consequently crushing Suzuki inside. Beizo went on. His Majesty gifted me the seal of spheres. I can generate orbs of varying sizes to shield me from assaults or ensnare my foes inside them. This particular orb will keep you imprisoned within. Any escape effort will make it rebound your assaults back onto you while constricting. With Susanoo active, that sphere will make your own technique destroy you until only dust remains. Having said that, Beizo pivoted away, abandoning Suzuki to his destiny. Now that he's dealt with, I must inform His Majesty and await further commands. Beizo had barely finished speaking when a blade materialized before him, aimed directly at him. Due to its velocity and his Shintai being inactive then, Beizo was helpless as the blade pierced straight through his neck. Gah-ha! Beizo gagged as blood spewed forth from his mouth, his form toppling backward. His final sight was the fatal sword withdrawing, retracting into a serpent's maw before the snake vanished into the darkness. The sphere made by Beizo vanished following the man's demise. After it disappeared, Suzuki cancelled his Sharingan and Susanoo, gasping for air, his body lacerated all over. Although he wasn't trapped for very long, the harm it inflicted on his Susanoo had in turn severely wounded him. Who on earth was that? Suzuki wondered to himself, seeing Beizo's corpse on the floor, the blood from his injury already dyeing the earth crimson. Yet, the instant he posed that question, he sensed a cold, sharp object on his neck. Startled by the abrupt sensation and having failed to sense anyone, Suzuki spun around to identify the owner and was utterly astonished by the individual who rescued him. You, Suzuki breathed. Kukiku, we are reunited, Suzuki-kun, Orikimuro hissed, his amber eyes fixed upon Suzuki as his kusanagi, still coated in Beizo's blood, was held to the Uchiha's neck. Back at Konoha, with Jiraiya. Jiraiya's eyes grew wide as he abruptly sensed a massive exertion of chakra. He quickly returned to his senses, just enough to dodge another chakra discharge from Jinjo's firearm. Jiraiya retaliated by hurling multiple shuriken at Jinjo, which the Uzumaki evaded with ease. Their clash had wreaked great havoc upon the surrounding structures. Truly, nothing could be considered buildings now, with just some pieces of rock and timber left upright. Jiraiya was struggling to comprehend his foe's skills, much less besting him. Jinjo possessed excellent accuracy with his firearms and was unexpectedly skilled with them in close-quarters fighting. Worse still, he was swift, incredibly swift, vanishing from place to place with a velocity comparable to Minato's Hirishin. Jiraiya could hardly make hand signs or even enter Sage mode. You sensed it as well, have you not? Jinjo abruptly inquired, halting his attack on Jiraiya. Gazing at the Toad Sage, he added, some powerful fool has chosen to defy his majesty. Jiraiya grinned at Jinjo. Do not misjudge my master. He might be aged, but he yet possesses sufficient power to uphold his name as the god of shinobi, the Toad Sage answered with confidence. He will not fall to your kind, and I am aware you also felt the vanishing of 4 chakra signatures from your comrades. If that was meant to frighten me, then abandon the thought, Jinjo stated with a sigh. Moreover, regardless of the result, you will not be living to witness it. He concluded, then lifted his pistol, shooting a huge chakra blast toward Jiraiya, and their fight resumed. On top of the Hokage monument, Shingen, watching from the periphery while his leader confronted the Saname Hokage, saw the 4 corpses of the Kurikishi Hiruzen had slain. The 4 were Hagashi Uzumaki, with the mirror seal, Chijimu Uzumaki, with the seal for immobilizing a person's motion, Shiko Uzumaki, with the elastic property seal, and lastly, Kaneko Uzumaki, with the power to make individuals doubt themselves. Hagashi was the most brawny of the 4, but not biggest, although he was a bit taller than an average man. His crimson hair was both short and cut to form 3 red stripes, too. Beneath his Kurikishi mantle, he donned a zipped-up, sleeveless jacket and his trousers were lengthy, the strange feature being that he had black straps on them, 6 per leg. Fastened to his wrists were his twin mini shields, which were badly fractured. Following him was Chijimu, a slim but toned man having pallid skin and crimson hair shaped in an untamed rocker fashion, with fringe descending along his face's sides. His coat was open, exposing his torso where the clan's emblem was sketched. Chijimu's trousers were loose with openings in the middle, thereby showing his kneecaps. Shingen saw that Chijimu's tomahawk, A/N, for those unaware, that is an axe type, was on his corpse, snapped in 2. Next to him was Shiko, the biggest among the 4 and a veteran from the Second Shinobi War. His fair-complexioned head was hairless, though he had crimson bangs joining his beard, which encircled his mouth and covered his chin. Below the Iria mantle, he was dressed in what seemed to be a black button-up suit with coordinated trousers and a scarlet tie tucked into the first. He additionally had on dark sandals beneath the trousers, and next to him lay his shattered twin Tonfa. And at last there was Kaneko, the sole woman of the foursome. She was of average height, possessing fair skin and a comely figure. Her crimson hair, with a black dye on 3 fringes, had 1 plait dangling down her face's right side. Her Iryu attire was ordinary in appearance, with the mantle included. Only she had on a small skirt with shorts beneath it and tall sandals reaching her knees. Next to her unmoving right hand lay a Tanto whose guard resembled the clan emblem's look. Upon inspecting the 4 bodies, Shingen glanced at Hiruzen, surprised to find few to zero injuries on the former Hokage's person. Admittedly, there were minor scrapes and grime, but no indication of any real fight on him. To vanquish 4 Kurikishi I dispatched, with 1 being a Jonin from the Second Shinobi World War, and not emerge even remotely tired, Shingen reflected, gazing at the Hokage's eyes, which were fixed upon Jakuna. It seems Hiruzen Sarutobi is stronger than we had initially assumed. Returning to that man, Hiruzen and Jakuna were engaged in a fierce staring match. Ancient recollections from more than 50 years past rushed into both of their minds, leading up to their final clash following Uzushio's destruction. The outcome of that battle was Jakuna being knocked senseless and then taken away by his own clansmen while Hiruzen required urgent medical care for the injury Jakuna inflicted. An injury running from his left shoulder down his waist's right side, an injury so profound that had it gone deeper, it would have cut the Saname Hokage in half. And here they stood, face to face once more, but now Jakuna's army was attacking Konoha, easily overpowering most of the village's shinobi. Hiruzen couldn't help but notice that Jakuna looked younger than the Saname Hokage originally thought. Even with his clan's long lifespans, the elder Uzumaki should have at least a few strands of gray hair, and yet he looks around the same age as Jiraiya-kun and Tsunadeheim. Could it be some kind of seal that he designed over the past few years? Hiruzen thought to himself but pushed it to the back of his mind so he could focus on important matters. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, Jakuna smirked and said, "I'm amazed that you managed to defeat 4 of my Kurikishi so easily. Although they may have lowered their guard during the fight, which would be their own fault." No sooner had he finished that sentence than Hiruzen struck, appearing right before Jakuna with great speed, his adamantine staff already in his hand. Bringing it down with great speed, Hiruzen forced Jakuna to raise his left arm, infused with Shintai, to block the attack. Despite that, Jakuna showed some signs of staggering under the diamond-made staff's weight. "Sire!" Shingen shouted as he tried to make his way toward his leader. But the wind pressure from the contact those two made, combined with the chakra they were both releasing, was causing Shingen to be more focused on not falling off his feet or over the edge. So he jumped back several feet in order to remain a safe distance from the two combatants. "I see that even after 5 decades you still haven't changed, J-kuna," Hiruzen said as he jumped backward to give himself some distance from his opponent. "You still show the same lack of compassion for your subordinates even when they're dead." Then the Sandaime Hokage formed hand seals, Katon, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet Jutsu, and Hiruzen fired a stream of flames at his opponent engulfing him in flames. But J-kuna managed to jump through the flames unharmed before he took any serious damage and landed safely on the ground, with Hiruzen in front of him and the flames behind him. J-kuna smirked a little while secretly focusing his healing ability toward his left arm, which had a broken bone due to the strike from Hiruzen's attack. Lack of compassion? On the contrary, I have much compassion for my clan and kin, but no amount of compassion will protect them on the field of battle. The moment that we entered the battlefield, they were on their own to survive and they knew it. Then he looked at Hiruzen who was glaring at him. "However, you haven't changed a bit, Hiruzen Sarutobi, even after getting old. It brings me back to see how easily angered you'd get when something displeases you." "Enough talk," Hiruzen said as he thrust the adamantine staff forward. The staff began to extend at a fast rate that many would have trouble following, but J-kuna managed to dodge the strike easily and then raised his left hand toward Hiruzen. From the hand a ball of chakra formed before being fired toward the retired Hokage. However, Hiruzen wasn't one to be easily hit by such an attack, and with great acrobatic skills, he managed to do a flip over the chakra blast while keeping a firm grip of his staff. He soon found himself in midair right above J-kuna and, deciding to use this to his advantage, he reverted his weapon back to its regular size. Once that was done, he made a nosedive toward his opponent, intending to land a blow on J-kuna, adding some chakra to strengthen the attack. But J-kuna seemed to have predicted this as he raised his right arm and made a grabbing motion with his hand. A second afterward a small round-shaped object, which turned out to be a smaller version of the Uzumaki clan's crest, appeared from underneath J-kuna's cloak. It flew into the air and right into the awaiting palm, which was soon swung upward to meet Hiruzen's strike. The result of the two attacks colliding was the release of a massive wave of chakra that could be felt all over the village. With the battle between Kushina, Mito, and Naruto, the battle between, unknown to Kushina and Mito though, family was interrupted when they felt two massive chakra sources spiking and spreading throughout Konoha. The sudden blast caused Mito to stagger a bit since she wasn't prepared for such a thing, but Kushina and Naruto held their ground, with the former being used to such powerful bursts of chakra and the latter having expected such an event happening. However, Kushina was surprised when both chakra signatures were familiar. This is. But before she could continue, Naruto chuckled, catching both girls' attention. "Looks like Hiruzen's finally on the field," he said when he stopped chuckling but still had a smile hidden beneath his mask. However, against Jiji, the old monkey won't stand a chance. Mito was about to make a retort about how Hiruzen wasn't going to lose when Kushina spoke first. "Jiji? You're his grandson?" she asked. "Yes, I am indeed his grandson," Naruto replied. "I owe him a great debt, as do we all. All he requires of us is to follow him, and we will, as the clan, shall stand united and we will gain our revenge." Kushina looked at her masked opponent in shock. "You're going to follow him just because he helped you? Are you actually willing to die for him?" she asked incredulously. "I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand the meaning of family loyalty. After all, look what happened to your son," Naruto said. Kushina frowned at the comment, getting angry about how people keep reminding her of her failure with Naruto. She wanted nothing more than to find him and make amends with her son. Naruto just glanced at his mother, noticing the look of regret and pain in her face, but he didn't really care. Sure, he knew that his horrible childhood was because of Danzo trying to manipulate his parents. That still didn't mean that Minato and Kushina were completely innocent. They didn't do a thing to stop the shinobi and civilians from attacking and abusing him as a child. He was, however, grateful that Sasuke and Hinata were engaged elsewhere. While he knew that killing them would be inevitable, he didn't want to be the one to kill the only two that were kind to him as a child. "Enough of this pointless talking, my orders are to kill the both of you." And with that, Naruto momentarily sealed his sword before clapping both hands together. Then as he pulled them apart he murmured, "Shining lunar spear," and then a blue-colored spear of chakra appeared in between Naruto's hands. Before Kushina and Mito could react, Naruto threw the glowing spear straight toward them. Fortunately, they had enough time to jump out of the way and the spear hit the building behind them. When it did, it released a large explosion that destroyed everything nearby and sent the two Uzumaki females flying. Naruto shot toward Kushina, who was closer to him since the explosion sent her in his direction. But Kushina wasn't a seasoned veteran shinobi for nothing. She immediately recovered and managed to bring up her sword in time to block Naruto's sword strike. "Well, I guess killing you while you were distracted was just wishful thinking," Naruto muttered to himself before going in for another attack. However, to the surprise of Naruto, Kushina, and Mito, a fast-moving image appeared and grabbed Naruto, pulling him away from his fight. The only words Kushina heard were Naruto saying, "Uncle." Back with Hiruzen and J-Kuna. After making contact with J-Kuna and failing to injure/kill him, Hiruzen did a double backward spin in midair before landing, giving him some distance from his opponent. From there he saw that J-Kuna had brought out his weapon, an ornate sword looking similar to a Miao Deo that had a round, red, black, two-handed handle with a black circular guard. Hiruzen noticed that J-Kuna's clothes were slightly singed, giving the old Hokage some satisfaction. "I see that you've finally pulled out your sword," the elder Sarutobi commented. "By the sound of it, you wanted me to draw it," J-Kuna said as he faced Hiruzen. "I plan on crushing your entire being and that includes your sword," Hiruzen said as he spun his staff. "Now then, let's continue," the retired Hokage said before charging forward. J-Kuna swung his sword sideways to meet Hiruzen. The elder Sarutobi slammed his adamantine staff into the ground and stopped J-Kuna's blade. Using his staff as a stepping stool, Hiruzen did a flip in the air over J-Kuna. Then, focusing chakra into his left fist, the Saname Hokage tried to deliver a powerful punch right toward J-Kuna's face. But the Emperor of the Tachiagari managed to leap backward just in time and Hiruzen's fist impaled the ground and formed a crater instead. J-Kuna, as he flew backward, swung his sword downward and released a large arc slash of chakra toward Hiruzen. However, Hiruzen merely swatted it to the side with a swing of his staff. But that gave J-Kuna the opportunity to launch a sword thrust at Hiruzen, straight toward the former Hokage's chest. But when the sword impaled him, Hiruzen and his staff poofed into smoke, revealing it to be a shadow clone. "Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu," Hiruzen's voice cried from above J-Kuna. The Tachiagari Emperor looked up and saw hundreds of shuriken rain down upon him. At the same time, a pair of hands shot out of the ground underneath J-Kuna and grabbed the Uzumaki's legs. "Humph," J-Kuna commented. "This is becoming boring," he said as he waved his left hand above him. Aurora-colored energy followed his hands and soon the barrage of shuriken was scattered everywhere, not harming J-Kuna at all. That must be his Kitsune ability, blood mark. Hiruzen thought as he watched J-Kuna stab his clone underground. The clones soon dispersed and J-Kuna's legs were freed. Hiruzen frowned as he landed and faced J-Kuna again. "I just need to hold out for a little longer." The final showdown. "You know, I've noticed you've been using a lot of shadow clones in our fight," J-Kuna observed, his gaze fixed on Hiruzen. "I've known you a long time, Hiruzen, and I know that constantly using shadow clones isn't your style, especially at your age. So, what are you up to?" A smirk crept across Hiruzen's face, a look that suggested he knew something J-Kuna didn't. "My opponent isn't someone I can defeat with my normal style. But don't worry, this battle will end very soon," Hiruzen declared as a massive amount of chakra began to build within him. J-Kuna's eyes widened. He can't be building up so much chakra from nowhere. That means he's... The realization hit him. Aiming at the third Hokage, J-Kuna raised his left hand, which began to glow. "Arrow bullet," he shouted, and from his palm, a spinning blue chakra arrow the size of a man's arm shot out. The arrow flew at Hiruzen at lightning speed and exploded on contact. J-Kuna watched the smoke rise, impassively waiting to see if Hiruzen would emerge. After a few minutes passed with no sign of the Hokage, a smirk of satisfaction formed on his lips. That feeling was short-lived, however, as a voice behind him said, "You should know an attack like that wouldn't kill me." Before J-Kuna could react, a powerful blow slammed into his back, sending the Tachiagari Emperor flying forward and skidding across the ground. He managed to stop himself just before he reached the edge of the Hokage monument, bruised and scratched, a shocked expression on his face. Standing before him, unharmed, was Hiruzen Sarutobi, his adamantine staff in hand. The third Hokage looked different now, with intricate brown marks tattoos, even patterning his face. A huge amount of chakra radiated from him, and J-Kuna instantly recognized it. "This is Senjutsu Monkey Sage Mode," Hiruzen finished for him, staring at the Uzumaki. "I must admit, it's been a while since I've used this, and I wasn't sure I could do it at my age, but I'll manage for now." "But how?" J-Kuna asked, getting to his feet, his right hand still gripping his sword's handle. He could feel several broken bones from the last attack, and it was only thanks to a quick use of Shintai that he wasn't bleeding. It would take a while for his enhanced healing to mend the bones. To enter Sage Mode, you need to absorb natural energy. And to do that, you have to be absolutely still. So how? Monkey Sage Mode is a bit different from other variants, Hiruzen explained, lifting his staff over his shoulder. With Inma in his staff form, he can absorb natural energy from me because, in that form, he's technically still since I'm the one moving him. Furthermore, I had 2 clones meditating somewhere safe, absorbing energy. Once they were done, they dispersed, and the natural energy they gathered was transferred to me. J-Kuna glared at Hiruzen. "I'm amazed at how far you would go to defeat me, using something so risky," he commented. "True, but it was necessary to defeat you," Hiruzen replied, "as it was one of the weaknesses of your medallion." The comment made the Tachiagari Emperor's eyes widen before they narrowed. "What?" J-Kuna almost growled. Losing your specialty is a dangerous and terrible thing, Hiruzen said, continuing his explanation. However, to even know someone's specialty, you must first research it. Along with your mastery of seals, your clan greatly valued information and knowledge. In other words, you had to research the skills of the shinobi who presented the greatest threat, because without that, you couldn't steal things like kekei genkai, techniques, or a person's fighting style. And my style has changed much since the last time we fought. The second thing is that for you to steal it, not only does the person have to perform the technique before you, they also have to make hand seals. Hand seals are the most primary requirement for any kind of jutsu. If the person doesn't make them or you can't see them, then your medallion can't steal it, can it? Hiruzen questioned J-Kuna. J-Kuna said nothing, but his glare intensified. And then there is senjutsu, Hiruzen continued. Senjutsu means I constantly absorb natural energy, which is an outside source of power, into my body. Your medallion won't be able to absorb that much energy, because those who are inexperienced will just turn to stone. Hiruzen then took a stance, gripping his staff with both hands and pulling it back, aiming the front directly at J-Kuna. Are you ready, Inma? We're ending this in one move. Ready, Sarutobi, let's do it, Inma replied in his staff form. What? J-Kuna growled, his anger and insult rising as he felt underestimated. You, kill me in one move? Don't make me laugh, Hiruzen Sarutobi. As if a peaceful, lazy old man like you can kill me in one what? J-Kuna's rant was cut short as he realized he couldn't move. Looking down, he saw seal formulas written on his legs. Wait, seals? But when? His eyes widened in realization as he recalled something grabbing his legs earlier. The shadow clone. By the look on your face, you've realized my clone earlier placed weight seals on your legs to slow you down, Hiruzen said, gathering chakra around his staff. Though I'm surprised a seal master like yourself didn't notice it sooner. Perhaps you're also going a little senile. Hiruzen joked before getting serious again. This is the end, J-Kuna. Senpo. J-Kuna gritted his teeth, struggling to move. The seals on his legs and the wound on his back had immobilized him. Hiruzen Sarutobi, he roared as a final act of defiance. Monkey King Iron Fist. Hiruzen roared and thrust his adamantine staff forward. Like a cannonball, a force of concentrated chakra in the form of a fist shot out of the staff straight towards J-Kuna. Everything after that happened in a second. J-Kuna was now standing motionless with a large hole in his chest. The Tachiegari Emperor wore a look of shock and disbelief as he fell backward, landing on the ground. The revelation. Hiruzen was panting heavily, leaning on his staff for support as sweat rolled down his wrinkled face. The marks on him faded as his sage mode deactivated. Inma quickly changed into his normal form, helping his old friend stay on his feet. Are you okay, Sarutobi? The Monkey King asked. I'm fine, Inma. Hiruzen panted. Looking at J-Kuna's body, the third Hokage was certain the Uzumaki was dead. I'm really getting too old for this. If we had attacked a minute later, I wouldn't have been able to hold sage mode anymore, Hiruzen said, finally regaining his bearings. Inma smirked at his old friend. True, but we won, though there are still invaders in the village. Indeed, but with their leader dead, the enemy's morale will go down and they might even retreat, Hiruzen commented, looking down at the village. Who's dead? Hiruzen and Inma's eyes widened, and they spun around at the voice, only to be blasted by an invisible force of energy. The two friends were sent flying backward, blood coming from their mouths from the surprise attack. Once they recovered, they looked up in utter shock to see an unharmed and living J-Kuna Uzumaki standing before them, no hole in his chest, a mischievous smirk on his face. How? Hiruzen murmured. How the hell are you alive? Inma roared, getting up. How am I still alive? J-Kuna asked mockingly. Simple, really. I wasn't the one you were fighting. He was. J-Kuna pointed toward the body. Hiruzen's jaw dropped in horror as he followed the finger. The corpse of J-Kuna Uzumaki was gone. Lying on the ground with a hole in his chest was the mangled form of Danzo Shimura. He also had a prosthetic right arm, which replaced his Mokutan arm with the Ten Sharinan. But how? The chakra signature he was giving out, it was definitely yours, and when did you even? You forget I'm a seal master, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Is it so hard to imagine that I could create a seal to forcibly control someone while also making them take my appearance along with my chakra signature, personality, memories, and techniques? J-Kuna said, as if talking to a child. As for when I did it, before the start of the invasion. Hiruzen's eyes widened at the implications. J-Kuna saw it. Exactly. The Danzo you were speaking to in the INT building was actually me, and I have to say those suppression seals were easy to remove. But don't worry, those root agents are the real deal, though they had no idea their leader was a fake. Why would you do that? Hiruzen demanded, glaring at J-Kuna. Simple, really. I wanted to visit the Uzumaki temple outside the village, J-Kuna answered, earning a gasp from Hiruzen. It had things in there I wanted to get. Also, despite its less graceful appearance, it's still an important place, and I wanted no interruptions. so I had Danzo take my place to shift attention from me. J-Kuna drew his sword and raised it toward Hiruzen. So what now, Sandaime Hokage? Did you use up all your chakra and strength fighting my fake? J-Kuna asked mockingly. The taunt angered Hiruzen, and he acted quickly, not knowing he was walking into a trap. Shut up, shadow clone. Hiruzen's sentence was cut off as many of his techniques disappeared from him, pulled by a black vortex into the medallion J-Kuna held. While you're correct that we require information on a person's abilities, if the target needs in their chakra and begins forming the technique, we can steal it. Also, the first requirement can be overruled if the user is stronger than the target. That, and only someone with biologically born Uzumaki blood can use these, which is why Danzo, in my appearance, didn't use it at all, J-Kuna explained before looking at the medallion. Now then, perhaps I should summon some monkeys and have them attack the village. You bastard. Inma roared in charge toward the Uzumaki, but J-Kuna only spared him a glance before firing another wave of energy that exploded upon impact. The explosion didn't kill Inma, but the injuries forced him back to the summoning world. Inma, Hiruzen shouted as he watched his friend disappear. A shadow fell over him. Looking up, Hiruzen saw J-Kuna before him, his sword raised and covered in chakra. With a malicious smile on his face, J-Kuna said 3 words, "Farewell, Hiruzen Sarutobi," before bringing his sword down on the third Hokage. The aftermath. Back with Shingen, the Uzumaki was making his way toward J-Kuna. He had felt the disguise, Danzo's chakra, disappear before sensing his leader's chakra and, soon after, Hiruzen's disappearing. It was clear the battle was over and who the victor was. "Looks like it's over," a voice said. Shingen didn't flinch as Kane appeared before him, a bit dirty and rough, but the second in command of the Tachiagari looked fine. The Konoha shinobi were all in distress when Hiruzen's chakra disappeared. Their morale is way down now, Kane commented. "I see," Shingen said as he and Kane walked toward their leader. "How was your fight, Kane-san?" the captain of the Kurikishi asked. "Kind of easy, really, though I guess I got lucky," Kane said, earning a questioning look from Shingen. "If Minato had set his kunao around the area where we fought, he could have easily overwhelmed me despite my seal's ability. That and his feelings got in the way, making it less difficult for me to beat him." "That's good to hear, Kane-san," Shingen replied. "What about your nephew?" "I sensed he was fighting his mother and sister." "He was, but I pulled him out before coming here," Kane answered. "Father wants him to be ready, and having him fight right now would displease him." Naruto wasn't happy about it, but he didn't argue. "We managed to slip away without Kushina spotting me." Kane took a breath before continuing. "I'll be heading back now to check on the others. From what I can tell, we lost 5 members, including the 4 Hiruzen killed." "Who was the 5th? Shingen asked, surprised that another Kurikishi was killed. "Gujen, done in by Tsunade," Kane replied. "And I'm not sure, but I think Beizo is dead too. Anyway, I'm going. You should go and check on His Majesty," Kane said before heading toward the village. Shingen watched Kane disappear before heading toward J-Kuna. The latter had his sword in his hand, the weapon covered in blood that dripped onto the ground. Lying before him was the body of Hiruzen Sarutobi, his face against the ground, a large cut going down the left side of his body with a large amount of blood coming out. Lying on the side was Hiruzen's helmet, split in 2 from J-Kuna's sword strike. "Your Majesty," Shingen said, approaching his leader and bowing. J-Kuna just gazed down at the fallen form of Hiruzen, a look of pity on his face. Finally, he turned and spoke to Shingen. "We're finished here, Shingen. Let's go." "Yes, sire," Shingen replied with a bow. As J-Kuna moved to walk away, he stopped when he felt something grab his right leg. Looking down, he saw that Hiruzen had grabbed it with his right hand, a dying attempt to stop J-Kuna. "Humph, how pitiful," J-Kuna muttered, calmly cutting off Hiruzen's arm from the elbow. "I can't believe that even when dying, you would still try to stop me." J-Kuna turned to face Hiruzen's body again, placing his sandal on the former Hokage's bald head. "Do you know why we have reached this moment, Hiruzen Sarutobi?" J-Kuna asked, not really expecting a response. "It's because you're weak. And it's not because you're compassionate. It's that you're too compassionate. You allowed Danzo and Orochimaru to conduct their plans in the darkness, allowed them to escape even when you had the chance to kill them. You used to be different, though. In the past, you still had compassion, but you were also a beast. Wherever you went, your enemies feared you and your might. You showed no mercy to anyone that threatened your home, whether they were invaders or traitors. But after the end of each war, when peace came, after the destruction of Uzushio, you began to lose your fierceness little by little and became more and more compassionate. And that became your downfall," J-Kuna said, removing his foot from Hiruzen's head. "The people of Konoha also became relaxed and arrogant, believing themselves to be the best and in the right, simply because of famous people such as Hashirama Senju, Tobirama Senju, the Yellow Flash, the White Fang, the Sunin, and yourself. You let people push you around like a puppet on strings and let problems after problems form, piling up more mistakes on your shoulders." J-Kuna then raised his left arm and pointed his index finger at Hiruzen. Chakra began to form around it as he kept speaking. Even though you're dead, I will tell you this: Konoha is going to fall, but its will of fire died 50 years ago, along with Uzashio. And with that, J-Kuna released a barrage of chakra bullets. When they touched Hiruzen, they created a huge explosion, consuming Hiruzen's body and about 50 feet of ground around him. The explosion could be heard throughout the village, and everyone, both Konohanin and Kurikishi, paused as they looked toward the mushroom cloud of smoke in the air. With his back to Shingen and his eyes on the rising smoke, notified the Kurikishi. We're leaving the village now. With their forces decimated by half, we'll wait and see what the other nations and villages will do before planning our next move, J-Kuna ordered. Yes, sire, Shingen replied as a portal leading into darkness opened behind them. As they entered, more portals opened over the village for the Kurikishi to enter. The Tachiageri people quickly entered their respective portals, leaving Konoha, a village now in ruins.